All right, what's up, everybody? We are back with the podcast, and this is another, I suppose, more science-related episode where we're going to be delving into skills acquisition. I've got Kabir joining me here, who I was connected to through Dr. Matt Hu from 1HP, and he highly recommended you, Kabir. So thank you for joining me.
No, thank you for having me, and Matt's a great guy, and I love that podcast as well. So yeah, thank you for having me.
You're absolutely welcome. I think it's really cool to get to speak to people like yourself because from the esports performance space, I don't think there's a lot of coverage of the thinkers, I think, and people that are trying to kind of forward this area. And especially right now, because esports, I feel like isn't in a place to focus as much on moving this area as a whole because the industry is affected by the macroeconomic situation. People are spending less, so I feel like a lot of teams see it as a luxury. But that isn't to say that the work isn't still happening and there isn't still individuals like yourself trying to push the envelope here. So I'm really interested to speak to you. And with that said, obviously people might understand with Matt, his area, his dominant area is sort of in the more kind of physiotherapy world and the more that kind of physical world. And as it relates to performance, I speak to Casey a lot from 1HP, more diet, nutrition. I've spoken to Ryan from Adamas, who's another excellent performance coach, and we talked a lot about culture and leadership and that kind of stuff. But and when it comes to skill acquisition, I've only spoken to Metadoc before, who you have worked with. You told me, so that's really exciting as well. It's a small world in performance esports. So. Kabir, what are the things that you've been working on the most, and how did this relationship between yourself and 1HP or Matt happen initially, and what has been exciting you about the stuff you've been doing with him?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess the elevator pitch to my career in esports, it's more new relative to 1HP and Metadoc. I've only been formally in esports for about a year and a half now, but I've been studying coaching and the science behind coaching for about 7 years now, and I've been a coach myself for the past 10. I started coaching in basketball, and that got me really interested. And then about a year and a half ago, I was like, you know what, I really like video games, I really like coaching, and I also really like doing research. All of these three avenues were kind of converging in this industry. I'm like, you know what, it'd be great if I can tell my parents I could play video games for a living, or I can say like I'm actually doing research while I'm playing CS or League or whatnot. And so that's how I kind of started. So I wear essentially three caps in the esports space. I guess at this moment in time, the two primary caps are being a coach developer and a researcher. So I'm about to go start my PhD in a week's time at Queensland University of Technology in Australia. And then the third cap I wear is the role is known as the skill acquisition specialist, which is kind of more my front of the line role, where I'm working with teams, working with players, more specifically to help them understand how they can better enhance their learning process, how they can transfer more of what they've learned into like their performance space, how they can achieve better results, or at least set themselves up for more success. And then that they can continuously to grow, continuously to learn, and really bringing some science and some evidence behind it. Even though right now there's not much in the esports specific context, there's a lot of overlap between what's been found in traditional sports, and there's a lot of low hanging fruit that we can kind of translate over, adapt, and then make it fit for purpose here. And then there's also a lot of technical things that hopefully we find ways to jump through today, that I'm also trying to set the foundations for, so that coaching practice, the talent development process, is more rewarding, is more sustainable, and just so we can kind of address some of the challenges we're facing, both from the player perspective and then from like the coaching, the management, the organizational perspectives.
Okay, so there's a lot there that's really interesting. I think the first thing I want to pick out is, you mentioned that you got into coaching through basketball originally. And so I'm curious, what is it about basketball that translates in terms of the coaching stuff pretty directly? And what are the things that maybe surprise you that don't translate when you cross those two things over or together?
So like basketball and the majority of esports, especially like I would say like the big three esports. I know maybe I'm excluding others, but I would consider the big three League of Legends, CS, and Valorant. Um, they're both invasion games, and with them both being kind of invasion sport, they're founded by like general principles of plays, and by understanding and interacting in that traditional sporting space. So I've coached water polo, I've coached basketball, I've coached football. All of these sports are also invasion sports. They work to a degree logically very similarly in terms of like the tactical components, and it's kind of getting some of those ideas crossed over to then have a more, how would you say, a coherent way to explain some of the plays you want to make without being too restrictive. And then obviously the biggest difference between coaching a traditional athlete and coaching an esports athlete is the domain of kind of performance. Traditional sports is predominantly physical. You need to be really in shape. You need to have those. You need to have agility. You need to have balance. You need to have, more hand-eye coordination. There's more emphasis on those. Sure, we still need hand-eye coordination when we're playing esports, but it is a predominantly cognitive domain. So the way we then train, the things we can do and can't do, um, don't change massively in terms of like how I structure and the advice I might give, but the effect the things I'm measuring, the effects I'm looking for, and the data I'm using to infer whether learning has occurred might look differently, just because one, I would argue, maybe also because our understanding of the physical body is a lot deeper. Um, it's easier for me to infer learning in traditional sports than it is in esports, but that's also mixed in with I'm not meeting my players in person. Most of us are working remotely, whereas I'm not coaching a basketball team. I'm not living in New York. I'm not coaching a basketball team in LA, right? But that's very much the case, or that could be a big possibility for a lot of grassroots tier two, maybe even some tier one teams in a lot of the esports we see.
So one thing you mentioned there in that answer was that esports is predominantly cognitive in nature. What are the physical aspects that you may describe there? Is there any I suppose more from a scientific perspective, a way that you could say certain things are physical? For example, let's say you're trying to shoot with the mouse. You're in the mouse control skills. Is that a physical skill to any extent, or in terms of the scientific perspective, is that also treated as a cognitive skill?
So technically, they're relatively perceptual motor skills because I need to be able to see like what I see on the screen will then dictate how I move my mouse. But if I have an injury in my wrist, that will change how efficiently I'm moving my mouse. Other physical skills the most obvious and the most prominent physical skill in most esports will be reaction time. Again, that isn't in isolation, and that isn't only a physical skill. It's very much a perceptual, like a physical and cognitive skill paired together
Mm.
that creates the product of reaction time, that creates the product of, how good my aim is. But
Oh,
given there's so few physical skills, I'm comfortable arguing that reaction time and, hand-eye coordination are more physical than cognitive, even though in reality they share the cake 50-50.
okay, interesting. And when it comes to mechanics and so on, I know that you got involved with Voltaic with regards to the Get Amped program with Metadoc. Is that correct? So you have some involvement. Um, what was your involvement with that, and what sort of drew you to that in the first place?
So I'll preface this by I am not a massive FPS guy. At least not a tech FPS guy. I'm very much a Call of Duty. Give me an SMG. I'm just gonna run around the map, die a bunch, get a bunch of kills. But something that's always really interested me is this idea of aim training and how useful is it really towards expert performance. So although we never really got it too far off the ground, what the involvement between me and Metadog and Amped and Voltaic was I'd outlined a research study looking at the efficacy, so to speak, and trying to quantify how much learning was happening through aim training, and
Mm.
looking at which programs, um, like what does like a perfect aim training routine look like. I don't think there is a perfect aim training routine, but like what are like best practices when using aim trainers. How does it affect you at different stages? So if we looked at like a novice, an intermediate, and an expert, and my hypothesis was aim trainers don't make you better at aiming, they make you better at seeing. because again, if we go back to what I said previously, hand-eye coordination is perceptual motor, and they're coupled together. So every time we need to see to be able to move, and every time we move, we change what we see. And there's that like that cycle kind of just goes on and on and on and on until we decide to close our eyes and go to bed. Um, so for me, it was very much I wanted to get eye trackers, and then be able to look at how well someone's kind of gaze behavior, which is ultimately how well they can focus on a target, how many blinks are they taking, where's their focus right before they make an action. So gaze behavior research started in basketball free throws, and it's a really good way to understand kind of how well you're dealing maybe with stress as well, but also how good of an expert you are. So Vickers or Joanne Vickers, who started this research or started this research topic, at least from where I'm informed, what she did was she got a bunch of free throw shooters, got them hooked up with an eye tracker, and got them to take free throws. When the people who shot a higher percentage had a more focused gaze on the rim and on the net, but ones who shot a lower percentage were looking around the backboard, were maybe looking at the wall of the gymnasium, maybe they were blinking more. And that's showing that they're more distracted, less distracted. And then, being able to keep your eyes on a certain point right before you click or right before you shoot, that's also been shown to be really, really effective for successful skill trials. And I wanted to kind of not replicate that study, but use that same logic, to see what the aim trainer did. Is it actually making you better at physically just being able to move your mouse? But even when you have your tracking program, and all the different sort of tests that, Voltaic could have ran, I wanted to see the difference between how well an expert, an intermediate player, and a novice would use their eyes, and was the correlation between the eyes and hand really there?
Okay, this is really fascinating because there's a connection here as well with because you're essentially sort of also talking about focus and attention, and those
Mhm.
are I feel like connected but different, to what you're describing, and it's really interesting too because the with aim training, one of the ways that I've always looked at it is that you have well, one of the cool things about the aim training community is that they sort of did the hard work to say, okay, let's quantify what aiming actually is. Let's try to categorize things. Let's break things down into those first principles and kind of build up from there. And then through that, you're able to uncover here are all of these like here are the techniques. So a good flicking technique we have discovered is the combination of these other smaller skills in quick succession, executed in quick succession together. It's kind of like a compound movement in the gym, where it's like not just one muscle group, but you got to your central nervous system has to learn to coordinate all these things efficiently together to execute the movement. So that's the element of strength is practice, as opposed to strength is the how much actual kind of raw potential you have for energy output with the muscles. So in this case, I'm curious as well. Is there like this I guess if we take the analog there, this CNS type of situation where we're just okay, that's what we're doing in the aim trainer. We're trying to get like reps on a more efficient sort of sequence of movements that are executed, or types of movements that we have practiced, and the aim trainer is there to isolate so that each of those individual movements we can also assure that we are training those to a high quality standard because we're able to spend time on each one incrementally. And then you put all those together, you got your technique. And so then the next component is actually making the shot on the target, utilizing the techniques or skills that you've created. And so, would it be fair to say that that portion is sort of the eye portion? Is there these two elements here, from in terms of your hypothesis? Or is it more about the eyes? Or tell me if I'm on track based on how you see things, or if I'm veering off course.
So I think those are logical assumptions to make, and I think based on how we've been taught anything growing up from school to first playing video games, these are logical assumptions we go through. From the theoretical underpinnings that I come from, I wouldn't really agree that's like good practice at all, because for me technique is, it doesn't really matter, because look, if we go down to the simplest form, have you ever tried to hammer a nail into a wall or like a painting, try to put a painting up? ever like moving houses, anything like that, trying to build an IKEA kit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So think about, just if we just take that mundane task, what the end goal is to get the nail in, right? We want the nail to be secure, and we're hammering away. But each repetition of the hammer swing, it's never following the same trajectory. So w- technique ultimately aims to, like you said, isolate, and you're trying, a lot of people try to find like a perfect technique, like this is the right sequence of things. And yes, there's an argument to be made that perfect technique can exist in esports, because everything's bound by math, and there's not as much complexity as like the physical world. But even then, technique means nothing without context, and that's what skill behavior is. Skill behavior is being able to achieve a functional solution or achieve the outcome through a functional movement pattern. So it doesn't matter how I swing the hammer as long as the nail goes in. Doesn't matter how I release the basketball. Stephen Curry will release the basketball different to LeBron James, because they're different heights, they have different proficiencies, they have different timings of release. If you really break down the biomechanics of their shot, their elbows are off by degrees of margin of degrees. They have a different finger that leaves the ball last. They put different spin on the ball, and in the same way, you could do all these really, really fancy, technical aim training things, but you're missing so much real information when doing these things. I always have to question whether it's the most effective. Now, for a novice, I can see the value, because again, it's reducing complexity, it's simplifying the task, and it's giving them a lot of repetition, and hitting the target is a lot of positive feedback from the aim trainer. But as you go up that proficiency ladder, so to speak, as you become more of an expert in the game, I do think you're hitting diminishing returns when trying to spend a lot of time in aim trainers, mainly because it's so divorced from what the actual game looks like. Because when you're in an aim trainer, 9 times out of 10, you aren't moving the character anywhere. You're only moving the crosshair. So you're not practicing how to keep both things aligned. So now you're not using both hands. It's kind of like trying to play the keyboard on your right hand, then learning the left hand, then trying to put it together. That's going to take you, more often than not, a lot longer process. And it's also more likely to break down when you're stressed out, and you're more likely to make mistakes than if you just try to learn both of them together. Now, obviously, if you just started playing the piano, it's going to be really hard to do that. And a lot of people get demotivated. So they do one hand, they do the other hand, and then they try to piece it together. When you're a novice, that's completely okay. But I think as you go up and up and up that expertise level, you need to be staying more and more close to as real as you can get. So I would probably taper down how much time we spend in aim trainers trying to iron out these techniques, because that technique kind of goes out the window when you have someone on the other side of the wall already aimed down sight, or ready to wait for your peak, and you have someone shooting against you. You're going to take a corner completely differently if you have 100 HP and shield versus 10 HP no shield. Whether you have the Vandal, or the stock pistol, all of these things make such a difference to the technique we apply. So I like to really make people aware that these aim trainers are really good for feeling good and making you feel ready. But after a certain point, you're gonna hit diminishing returns, and you're kind of just wasting time being here. And you might as well just jump into a death match. That's gonna give you a lot more learning. That's gonna give you much higher quality reps, even though the reps don't feel perfect. They don't feel specific. But in reality, when we are in that messy environment, we're actually learning more stable skills, and we're able to pull out the right technique, so to speak, to match the outcome we want.
It is really interesting because I think there are lots of things out there that exist where we may confer benefits directly to a specific activity, but it may actually instead be that the benefits may come from other things that are a consequence of engaging in the activity, but not the activity itself. So, for example, let's say I was doing some research about breathing in the respiratory system recently, because people have been asking for like a video on that, and I was looking over a Huberman podcast where he was talking with Dr. Feldman, who's like this world kind of pioneering researcher in the cardiovascular, the respiratory system, and he was saying that he had this hypothesis that hey, everyone's into meditation. I think it's a lot of bullshit, but let's kind of look into this a little bit more because I have a theory that is meditation doing something, or is it actually just the breathing? Because something that's consistent with meditation is slowed breathing, and you're intentionally taking over that system typically as well. And usually people do that because the whole idea of meditation is it's a control of attention, and by sort of having that physiological feedback loop of I'm going to relax my body with the breathing, it's going to make it easier to control my attention. It's going to make it easier to kind of slow those racing thoughts, and kind of it becomes a game of attention, and breathing helps with that. And so he's like, well, let's just see how many benefits are conferred just with slowed breathing. So he did a study where they got a group of mice, and they slowed their breathing for 30 minutes a day for 30 days, and then at the end of the month, they tested them against the control group, and then the fear response that was induced on the mice that did the 30 minutes per day of kind of meditation, or slowed breathing, they had what they would describe as like a significant manipulation of the amygdala. So their fear response was massively reduced. And so and that is such a obviously it's a mice study, because obviously it's easier to control that, but that's really interesting, because that is pretty profound if that does transfer over, and it feels reasonable to say that that's likely the case. And so with aim training, do you think that it's the case that a lot of benefits that people experience are not necessarily due to some of the things that people might say, okay, well, you get more volume in the aim trainer as opposed to the in-game where you're not shooting as much, and so on and so forth? Do you get the benefits more because of the routined practice, and sort of the benefits that might come from someone that's just has a practice regimen where that is, they're able to get a bit more volume at the beginning of the day? So is it the aim trainer benefits, are they overblown in some respects?
Yes and no, right? And I watched this really interesting video by this guy called Michael. I can't remember his last name, but he does a lot of like docu vlogs, I guess you can call them.
Yeah.
Like mini series about a lot of like high level basketball stuff. And today he released a video about the hot hand, right? And is that a myth? Is that reality? Whatever. And similarly with that, I think aim training helps people feel ready. And because they feel ready, because they've been doing this sort of activity for so long, it's like to them it's like the gold standard. To them it's like the way we do things. Because they feel more ready, they will then go on and play more confidently in their ranked games, in their scrims, and their officials, because they've done that thing that's routine to them, that's got them into that place of comfort and familiarity. It's not to say it's like a superstition, because I definitely do think aim training is an amazing warm-up tool. I just think there's dangers of creating a disconnect between the actual amount of learning you can achieve per session if you're imbalancing time spent in aim trainers versus playing even just a one-on-one with a friend on the actual map where you're both running around, and then going on playing the real game. I think so. In certain respects, yes, I think some of the gains you get from aim trainers are overblown, but it's not to say that they're completely useless. I just think we need to be better at recognizing the true value it gives us. And I think more often than not, because aim trainers are purely execution focused training is much better for confidence rather than competence. So if you want to feel confident in your skills, go spend time in an aim trainer, because you're going to get high value. You're going to get very simple. You can't argue with the feedback and the metrics it gives you. Whereas you can argue with some of the metrics, the live game gives you. You can say, oh, well, I'm playing against better players, or, oh, I had bad teammates, oh, whatever, you can say all these things. So you might not feel as confident in your learning, but in reality, unless if you're very low down the expertise ladder, or you're trying, I'm trying to learn a sniper, or I'm trying to learn a new sensitivity, or I'm trying to do this new tracking program because I've recognized I'm not very good at flick shots, or I'm not very good at taking like seeing someone come out of a corner, and if you can set up the program to, have the dummy just pop in and out, pop in and out while you're standing still, then there's value, because then now you're adhering to principles of deliberate practice. You have a goal, you have high repetition, you maybe even get some feedback. You can get feedback from either looking at the score and the accuracy, that Ampton will take, and all the aim trainers can give you. You can even get feedback from a coach or peer. Then you get a lot of tries, you get good repetition. It's somewhat, representative. It's not completely divorced, because there's more things. So you've taken like a live slice of what you want to practice, and you've put it in the aim trainer, and then you can monitor and adjust that goal. So you can either scale that goal up. Let's say you want to get 1,000 points with 80% accuracy. Let's say you get that on your first go. So next go you can do, okay, I want to keep it 1,000 points, but I want 90% accuracy, or I'm happy with 80% accuracy, but I want to get 2,000 points within 30 seconds, for example. And you can run these tests over and over again, and I think that gives you a better framework for learning, rather than just going, oh yeah, this pro said this pro put out this aim trainer routine. I'm just going to do it blindly for an hour, 2 hours, and end. Oh wait, I only had 3 hours to play today. I spent 2 hours in aim trainers. I'm now just gonna play the game I want to play, and I'm only gonna measure. I'm only gonna feel like I've learned if I've won or lost those games, because I've spent 2 hours in aim trainers. And I think a lot of athletes and a lot of gamers come to this conclusion that I'm spending so much time here, surely it should translate, but they can't pinpoint why it's not happening. And more often than not, it's because it's not realistic. They're not practicing how they're playing, so it's hard to take that over, and really apply it when you need it.
Yeah, it's really interesting actually, because I do think that well, so the whole experiment, I suppose, with the Voltaic Get Amped program is, okay, we've got professional players that are already, some of the best aimers in the world in their respective titles. What can we do to, coach them through to improve even more? And there's definitely a confidence element. I completely agree with that, and I think some of that does come down to the fact that you are able to condense volume in a way that you can't in game, and that I think can help you to, let's say you jump in the game, what might take you if you're just playing, even if you're deathmatching, to be honest, it might take you 2 hours like playing your death matches to really feel like very warmed up. Whereas in an aim trainer, if you're in there for like 20-30 minutes, you'll come out feeling actually like better. And that's my consistent experience. So I completely agree about that aspect. In terms of the transferring to game, I'll get to that in a second, because when you mentioned the playlist thing, which I wanted to touch on first, what I've found is that for a lot of people, myself included, aim trainers felt really inaccessible, because that did seem like the thing that you do. Okay, I'm going to pick up a playlist. This says this is what this does. If I'm playing this task, it's going to help me with my flicking or whatever. Okay, I'm going to play this because I want to improve my flicking. But then it's actually, you're really engaged in a passive learning experience, which I think is really the big problem there. And because you don't have the knowledge to better understand where your focus and attention should be applied, then you end up not really knowing really what you're doing, and you're just expecting improvements to happen by just putting the time and the effort in without knowing where the focus itself should go. And I think that is always the key when it comes to effort. Effort is nothing without focus being applied in the correct place. And then that became for me the battle of trying to understand, well, if I'm going to be putting time into this, I have to be an active participant. And there's lots of studies I've seen which look at improving complex skills, where if you do actually put a focus onto like smaller elements one at a time, or just a small handful of stuff at a time, as opposed to focusing on trying to do everything and not really having an active focus, you get way better learning benefits conferred to you. It seems to be the consistent thing that's been found. So that seems to be kind of where aim training is right now. For those people that don't have access to a really knowledgeable coach, they have to get this base level of information, and then they have to then learn also how to be self-reliant and to analyze and diagnose themselves. This is like a really, I think, a pretty high barrier to entry that if someone's really serious about it, no problem, it's fine. But if because they'll invest the 30 hours of like watching videos and listening to podcasts and kind of getting a sense as to how to orient themselves within that training environment. But most people are not going to be doing that, and to be honest, most pros are not going to be doing that. And I know that, having been a pro, having like known a lot of pros are a lot more resistant and lazier than one might think. They like to put effort. They're good at putting effort into the places where they're comfortable, which is not often where the effort should go, especially if you're already at the elite level. So with all that said, it does, then, moving on to the transferring into the in-game aspect, I've got a lot of questions here, because this is also a huge point of it's a huge a question mark, I suppose, for many people, because there is a big lag. And so I'm wondering with this, do you think that it's the case that aim trainers can be used way more effectively, even by some of the people that are the best? And do you and also I have another question, which is, is the brain when it comes to the right hand, left hand, are those connected, like, or is it viable to say that we can separate these things? Because you could say, for example, with a pro, just like in the spirit of isolation, a pro has, because typically speaking, depending on the game, like, but even more complex games with movement, like, an Apex or a Quake or something, it's still the case that the timings and so on, and everything with your left hand and what your brain is doing to determine where you should be moving in space, that is, you can get that to a pretty good level, and you're not going to see a massive amount of gains. But if you put a lot of time into, obviously, trying to, get better aim, you can get a lot of gains there. There's a lot of things that you can do. So it feels like it should make sense that we can say, all right, let's not focus too much on the left hand. If we have a tool where we can really focus on the right hand, okay, cool, we can work on that. And then it would seem somewhat intuitive that, okay, well, now I've worked on my right hand, and I can just reintegrate that back into the experience, and that should be no problem. But like you highlighted, that doesn't really seem to be the case as well. And so how much of it might be the way that the brain is essentially connecting the hands together in the environment versus something that's more is there a more context specific reason why this happens when you're in the game? So how is it that we should really be thinking about this problem? Or is it the case that, would your hypothesis be that aim trainers are really useful for the warm up, but other than that, your gains are a bit more limited, and you should treat your time in the aim trainer as such? So big question.
If we only take the no, completely get it. Just trying to figure out how I want to formulate my response. So if we're assuming, and this goes with like, this is me giving advice to like an expert. I would say a tier 1 pro, probably, maybe even someone who's like the top end, a tier 2, like a rising star. Let's frame the context there. So there's this paper which talks about the extended challenge point framework. I'll link it to you after, and everything I mention, by all means, feel free to like remind me, and I'll link you all the resources that I'm referencing for the audience, and even for your own interest. And in this framework, it kind of looks at, on the y-axis, so vertically, you have difficulty, like task difficulty, so how much challenge is the task. And then on the x-axis, so horizontally, you have representativeness, which is the academic word for how realistic does this game look, or how realistic does this activity look. Now, in that kind of graph, the author signposts 3 different points, and one is halfway down representativeness, but really low difficulty. So it's really easy, and it's not the full game, but it kind of still feels like the game. Think of it like maybe driving down a pretty empty road. You're still on the road, but there's no cars, there's no traffic, there's maybe no traffic lights anywhere nearby. So it's a pretty easy thing. You're just trying to go straight. You might have to miss a few potholes. You might have to take a couple turns. And they classified that area as practicing to maintain. This is where you're kind of making sure your knife is still sharp, making sure all your tools still kind of work. This is where you're preserving like a level of confidence in your ability to be really good. And for me, this is where I position the aim trainer. For the elites or the very proficient, that's where I would just say, like, look, you just go here. And if you really want to learn something new, you need to up the level of representativeness, or you need to up the level of challenge by a significant margin. It's the more representative you make it feel, the more likely, the closer you're going to get to transfer, and the closer you're going to get to learning. So that sits kind of like bottom of the center, that practice to maintain spot, and then like everything below that 50% is questionable, to say the least. Like questionable in terms of like, if it's less than 50% representativeness, yeah, it might not give you the best value. I could say maybe even the range is go down to maybe 35% to what the real game looks like. As long as it looks 35% realistic, you're bound to maintain the skills you have. You're probably not going to get better, but you're definitely not going to get worse. And you might iron out a few kinks in your mechanics, in your understanding, and that in itself is a way to get better. I think a lot of people confuse what development actually is, and a lot of people think it's only getting better, but not getting worse is also a really good way to become really good. And usually, it's a lot easier to not get worse than it is to break your peak performance consistently. The second point then sits, you put the difficulty at between that 40 to 60% range, and you're fluctuating the realism between 50 to, let's say, 70%. Now this is where you're getting challenged, and like you said, most of our learning comes from stepping out of that comfort zone. And the more often we step out of the comfort zone, the bigger our comfort zone actually becomes. So it's kind of like they pour into each other. So in there, we're learning, and it's going to be a lot of it's going to be messy. There's going to be mistakes. It's going to make you feel uncomfortable. But those are kind of like the necessary symptoms of learning. Then you have transfer, like your practice to transfer, which is 90 to 100% difficulty, 90 to 100% realism. And this is exactly where you get to see, like, I'm playing the game purely to win. Can I still take all the things I've incorporated in that learning stage? Can I still can I use the learnings to either stack on top of my maintain skills, or am I adding another like kind of tool in my arsenal? So I have like 5 skills that I've maintained, I've added a 6th now. Can I use them appropriately at the right time? Am I able to judge which scenario needs what type of skill, what type of engagement? And then now you're looking at transfer, and then transfer, you can kind of measure it through win loss, but then you can also measure transfer through, I'm able to correctly apply or correctly deduce or correctly judge what I need to do, even if the outcome doesn't go correctly. So I'll just run with the basketball example. I can make it to the right spot. I can take the right shot. I've managed to get it over the defender. I've got the right elevation. Shot doesn't go in. That's okay, but my learning still transferred because I've done everything else correctly, but the outcome hasn't come. But I still know I've taken the right steps. I've done the right kind of procedures
Mm.
to make sure the outcome has happened. So to put myself in the right spot for the outcome to happen. Um, and then you just keep repeating, you keep finding ways to get back in that condition, and then over time, and we don't have infinite time, but if we assume infinite time, you will then reach a very high level of proficiency where you're almost automatic. But obviously we live in a real world. We don't have unlimited time, so there's always things that will gate us by time. And usually when we hit that resistance and we hit that like ceiling, there's one or two things you can really do. It's you can either go and work on a different skill, because I like to look at learning and development partially as like a skill tree. And sometimes you need to get 5 skill points in X tree to then unlock the next tier in an adjacent tree. But then also you might need like that learning, this learning, combine them together to then have a greater, sum of skills to then be able to use and then navigate that specific scenario, so to speak.
So where do you stand on the sort of the pyramid of competency? I actually don't know what the official term is, but like the bottom is like unconscious incompetence, and then conscious incompetence, and then conscious competence, and then unconscious competence. So that to me always was suggestive of the at least at the very least the starting point, because it's all really about awareness of issues, which is the necessary precursor to focusing on any part of any skill, because you're becoming aware of, oh, I suck at this thing. Oh, I have to now diagnose, why do I suck at this thing? Oh, okay, now I have to integrate the solution. Oh, okay, now I'm executing the solution. Okay, I have enough, habituation of the executed solution that now this has become a pattern. It has become I've logged it into that sort of like, kernel level part of my brain where it's automating all of these systems now. Because that's kind of, this is like an interesting thing sometimes that I explain with about like pro players, for example. Because with pro players, the whole battle against like in terms of like the mental game and in terms of like dealing with pressure and all these different things, it's largely speaking, it's all a battle of focus and attention, because so much stuff is coming to kind of essentially take away your focus and attention through various means. And if that happens, then you're losing this like finite amount of cognitive bandwidth that you have to perform the tasks that need to be performed consciously. And then if there is like an impact on the tasks that are performed consciously, I feel like has a downstream effect on the tasks that are performed automatically as well. So those also become a problem, and you can kind of get into this situation now where now your performance is starting to kind of dip, and it's like a feedback mechanism that's self-fulfilling to the negative. So for me, like this pyramid has been like very important as like a tool to kind of understand the great like performance in esports, to be honest, because it's so that the unconscious and then the sort of conscious element is something that within aiming as well seems to be pretty important in terms of the skill acquisition, because this is the thing about the in-game versus the aim trainer, which is I think that like what people want. And in Valorant, they don't really have the tools. Maybe in Counter-Strike, this is a little bit different because they do have more specific tools that replicate the in-game experience. But when you're in, let's say, a game of Valorant, I might be exposed to 500 different sort of aiming situations that are all different in nature, and my brain may not understand, based on looking at the screen at that snapshot or with the context, precisely how I'm supposed to execute the aim so that it is correct. Because like you say, the movement is important as well, and there's other elements, like for example, let's say I think there's a more specific term for this, but like the visual priming, where because you're anticipating with your game sense, your awareness of what's most likely based on the logic that's that you have, and how your inductive reasoning, you then narrow down the possibilities, and then you've got this like priming effect where now I kind of am predicting what's going to happen next, which allows my brain to prepare for the right understanding. Okay, I know how to aim in this scenario. But again, like if you're just going through lots of practice, playing lots of games, you're exposed to so many different scenarios all the time. Is that a hindrance to improving, because you're not getting to really cement in the repetitions on like one thing?
It's a tricky way to answer this, because truth be told, I don't have a concrete answer. But how I view it is, I really like this idea of we're being inductive in our reasoning and we're able to visually prime. I usually tend to just call those like deductive reasoning and then anticipation, where because I've been I'm making a rotation through I don't know. All CS maps have blanked me now. But
Dust
I
2,
I
Mirage.
played Inferno. I
Fun.
played Inferno last, right? And you're going from B to A, and you're going through library, for example. Now there's like X amount of places where there's like lines of sight advantages. So you can deductively reason that I need to check A, B, C. Um, but what a lot of esports players fall into this trap of is they try to find the perfect way to do it.
Yeah.
And although yes, there is a perfect way to do it, you're not playing in you're not playing like a campaign game. You're playing a game against other human beings who have different intentions of how they want to execute a bomb plant on the site. They have different. They're paying attention to different things on their screen, and how they're moving their mouse and how they're pressing the movement buttons on the keyboard. Are they crouched? Are they walking? Are they running? Are they strafing? Are they just going in a straight line? Are they doing something absolutely crazy? I don't know. Are they trying to knife the chicken? I don't know what's happening. So and because of that, I try and get a lot of players to think on functionality rather than optimality, because the functional movement solution still like gives you enough things to do, so to speak, that you can still be successful. Whereas optimality is like, I need to hit all 10 things on the checklist or this play isn't going to work.
Mm.
But you might need 10 things, but every scenario, because it's so different, you don't need to check all 10 boxes. Some scenarios only need 4 boxes checked. Some boxes only need 6 boxes checked. Some boxes might need all 10 boxes checked, and you need to have the perfect play. But I feel like a lot of players say, I'm not learning because it's not perfect, is slowing down, if not inhibiting their the amount of learning that can happen, or if learning occurs at all, because they just need to be able to say, did I approach the task in the way I know how to? Was I able to identify all the variables that makes this that makes this task go well? And then which ones did I check? And was the outcome achieved? Right? And then, not to outcome bias to say like, oh, the outcome wasn't achieved, that everything we did was incorrect, or the outcome was achieved, everything I did was correct. But it's the awareness and the curiosity. Is you need both of those things to go up these pyramids, of,
Mm.
I don't know what I don't know. It's very painfully obvious I suck. Oh, I'm getting kind of good. Yeah, I don't even need to think about it anymore. I think a great model to then use thereafter is this model of adaptive expertise. And on one side you have routine, which is kind of like, I know this is what I can do. This is what makes sense. This is intuitive to me. This is autonomous. And then on the other side, you kind of have exploration, where you're trying to do new things. You're trying to add skills. And then over time, as you balance these two things, you kind of come into this middle, whereas you have the right procedural knowledge, you know what to do, but you can also apply the what to do in all these different 100, 200,000 different scenarios, because each map will invite you to interact with it in a different way. Each team you play will invite you to interact with it a different way. When you're playing solo queue and you have different teammates every game, they're going to invite you to play in a different way. They're going to ask you to act in a different way. You can't just run it down the exact same angle every round, every way, because you might be able to run the route, but one time you run the route, there might be 3 enemies. The next time you run the route, there might be 0 enemies. So it's really finding, do I have what it takes to identify what is enough, rather than being able to only give 10 out of 10s? And then how can I understand all the different ways that I can interact to still have the same outcome? Ultimately, the fundamental process of CS and Val is, can I shoot them before they shoot me? That can be done 100 different ways. And it's not, and your perfect and my perfect might look very different. So instead of focusing on finding the optimal solution, just find what works, find what's functional, and develop consistency and confidence in that. And you're well on your way to not only gaining LP and like gaining your points and climbing the ladder, but you're also on your way to actually learning what is and isn't possible for you.
Mm. It's so there's a lot of really like awesome stuff there, and whenever I'm talking about performance with people, it's interesting how many ideas are really, how connected so many different ideas are. You can't just be master of one thing. Like there's just so many things. For example, you mentioned the word curiosity. And curiosity is really an interesting word, especially when because you also said exploration, which is in part what curiosity is, and it's also it's a precursor to learning effectively in that sense. Like you need to be curious to learn. And what's interesting is that when I talk about connected things in terms of performance, something that actually just owns so many different people is that the most people have a really weak mental game, and when we're experiencing a weak mental game, it's experienced typically through things in the game, essentially affecting you emotionally in a negative capacity. So if there's an anger response elicited, or maybe some kind of a stress response, fear, anxiety, sadness, you might be overwhelmed. There's like a lot of these different negative emotions that one might experience in game, and these things all go opposite to what curiosity actually is, or that state of mind. Because if you're fearful, you're not going to be exploratory. It's the opposite. You want to hide. You want to be in safety. If you're angry, you're going to be your focus is going to be narrowed. You're going to be more stubborn and limited with how you approach any problem, because anger brings across like that a self-righteous sort of kind of mentality, which is definitely and the antithesis of I would say a curious behavior. So in terms of the mental game, I feel like This is kind of an interesting one because I've never really talked about, hey guys, your learning's going to get really fucked up if you can't get your emotional kind of sort of game in check. So I just wanted to throw that in there because I think it's again so interesting how connected all these things are. And with that said, kind of playing off of the what you were talking about, I'm curious what you see as maybe the most outdated, outmoded practices that you see in esports that you're like, oh, this really needs to change, this really needs to go. I need to put some billboards up. I got to, someone's got to, figure it out. This is not good. So, like, are there big things like that you think people are really messing up?
I think so. There's like I think fundamentally there are three things you need to really learn anything in life. You need some sort of plan, and the plan is everyone thinks a plan needs to be like really perfect, and they spend like a lot of time like ironing out. This is the exact amount of sets I need to do, like even for the gym. This is the exact amount of sets I need to do. This is the exact amount of reps I need to do. I need to go exactly on these days, and I'm spacing it, and cool. It's great to have that, and if you can find the perfect plan for you, amazing. But again, I don't believe that perfect really exists, and I always use a plan as just like, this is my guiding light, and the point isn't to execute on that plan one to one, but it's just to use it as like the bumper cars, like the bumpers on like a bowling alley, to like kind of give you a lane to work within. Because when you're learning CS, when you're learning Val, when you're learning League, your bowling alley lane is like this big. You can't bounce around everywhere. It's going to be really hard to get a strike, right? You still only have 10 pins, but you have such a big lane. So you need like the plan helps you put those bumpers up to make sure your ball still goes down and tries to get you a strike. So the plan sits there. Then you need to be able to engage with the game in a meaningful manner. So, what does your warm up look like? How are you reviewing the game? But also, do you know when to play and when not to play? Are you able to understand, much like you said, what is your emotional capacity to these things? Because again, esports is a cognitive domain, so our emotions has such more impact on our performance than it would in traditional sport. Yes, I can be really, really angry in traditional sports, but I can still kick the football fine. It's easier for me to still just kick the football fine. Yeah, I might give away a silly foul. I might give a flagrant. I might turn into Draymond Green, but I can still pass the ball completely fine. I can still shoot the free throw. But when you're really angry and really distracted in esports, when you're fatigued, um, all of those things will inhibit your performance, will inhibit your focus, will inhibit your attention. And when those things are all kind of muddled up, um, and it all feels kind of like it's hard to separate them and be able to be very clear and pinpoint where they are, you're not going to learn that effectively. And I always ask, so I do a workshop for organizations for even players, and the title of the workshop is learn practice to learn to practice. Because the first half of that workshop we look at the science behind learning. We talk about the power law of practice. We talk about the challenge framework. We talk about zones of proximal development, which looks at comfort zone, slightly out of comfort, too out of comfort. How do we introduce more challenge into our training? But then I always ask them, what's the difference between play and practice? Because ultimately, we are playing video games, and the people who design this, they don't want us to walk away, right? We are the product, and they want us to stay and play it as long as possible. But if we're just playing, then it's a video game. But if we're practicing, we need to be able to walk away when it's not working for us. And a lot of players forget that. They end up starting their session in practice. They end up getting into play very quickly because these games are really fun. They're really addictive, and then they can't walk away, and they haven't really practiced that day. They just ended up putting another 10 hours in, and then they just keep stacking that. And a lot of people view hard work as the amount of hours you put in,
Yeah.
and it's not surprising to me that the average esports career is 2 years long, because they either don't get to meet high quality coaches, they don't get the opportunities to then go and make a living, but more often than not, they just burn out. They just lose the motivation. They stop finding the game fun because they've walked in, they've logged on saying, I'm going to practice. they've thought they've practiced for 10 hours, but they've practiced for 2 and played for 8, and then they go, "Huh, I haven't actually got any better. Well, this sucks. I'm gonna walk away, and esports was a massive waste of my time." But they don't realize it's kind of like self-inflicted damage more often than not.
Mm. Yes, it's there's just echoes one of the so one of the things that I most advise to anyone who wants to be competitive is that they have to have a process, and within that process it needs to include certain things. And it's and those certain things, like, you know, taking what I was doing the last couple of times when I was competing. You know, you'll start with, you know, like, I would never spend more than like 30 minutes on warm up, but the warm up itself will be segmented through different things. So 10 minutes might be, I might start with, you know, technique specific, where I'm thinking, okay, well, from my last day of training, what was some skills like executionally that I was having some issues with? Let's like put some, you know, some attention on that. And then after that, you know, I would go to like a general warm up. So, okay, we've got 10 minutes from, I'm like, now I'm practicing specific things in the game, like, okay, specific shooting styles, specific movement styles, things that I practically use in the game, in the in-game environment. Whereas the previous thing, because it's technique work, I can do that in the aim trainer potentially, is what I used to do. And then afterwards, I say, okay, now I'm gonna take the next 5 to 10 minutes, and it's gonna be what I used to call emotional warm up, but really it's all about, okay, now I want to feel good. I don't want to think about anything in particular. I'm putting the music on. I'm getting into a good frame of mind. And then the next stage after that's completed is the setting the mindset. So like setting the intention for the practice. And one thing that I used to say to people is construct your own, like, I call it, like, for myself, like the champion's mindset. Like, what does that mean to me? Well, it's basically a certain frame of mind that I get into, where it's like a contract of non-negotiables in terms of my conduct, my behavior, my intentions, my goals, how I meet challenges, you know, like all of these different things. And that as soon as I detect that I'm going to, you know, stray from that, that's the time, like you said, when, okay, now I know if I'm unable to meet these non-negotiables, now practice is over. And if that's over earlier than I wanted it to be, that's fine. And one of those non-negotiables, if you have the awareness to be able to understand this, and a lot of younger players aren't yet there, is understanding how much good quality focus you actually have in the session, because that can obviously change day to day, because we're all human beings. And so with that inherent variation, being able to be sensitive to it means that you're sensitive for, this is my most optimal range of practice hours, or whatever it is. And so, you know, I've had the last couple times I returned to competing, like the first time I tried this in 2017, I was very regimented with it. And I ended up actually having like in-game time of maybe no more than 4 to 5 hours per day at most. And I had by far the best execution, the most consistent execution, because I had very strict standards. I tried to practice exactly how I wanted to play in the match. So it wasn't that fun because I'm like really having to push myself all the time to make sure that all these little distractions, all these little things that would, oh, you know, I want to go and do this, take this fight because that's fun. It's like, but I know it's incorrect. Well, how can I expect to perform optimally in the match if I don't, you know, control the practice in that way? So I created all these strict controls for myself, and then that created, like you said, these kind of guardrails in all of the right places, so that I'm intentionally directing my development, and that gave me massive results. And the best thing about it was that it was very time efficient. I was able to spend more time on preparing for sleep, so that sleep was higher quality, so that learning was, you know, better as well. I was able to spend more time on let's say, you know, if I'd finished, then I could do more VOD review. If I finished earlier, I could, you know, put that extra time into the VOD review. And I'm also, because I have a process, the VOD review actually serves a purpose, because I'm going to select a couple things from the VOD that I like throughout the session. I made a couple notes. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go back, revisit this thing, and now I understand, is this thing a thing that I can now put into my process for tomorrow? That is something I'm either thinking about, practicing, or doing. So it's this constant process of improvement. And because if you continue to look after your mental game and continue to, oh, the cat just muting my mic, and continue to have standards whereby your practice is so high quality that, hang on, I think I lost my train of thought. Hang on. We have fostering kittens, and they're actually just crackheads. Have you been around kittens? They're just insane.
Yeah.
They're so annoying. This one's trying to
It's not the
crawl
worst
over
problem
me
to
and
have.
stabbing me whilst you're talking to me, trying to climb me. um, oh yeah. So one of the massive benefits that I found, and it was because also at this time I was really developing a much greater understanding behind the mental game and the emotional aspects to that, is that having a very controlled emotional environment is really important, because if you stay in a place where you're as happy as you can be possibly with the game, you're like actually enjoying it. And I know I just said I wasn't enjoying some of the decisions I made. Ultimately, I felt very fulfilled for following the principle, which is to commit to, honoring a value, which is I'm not going to make that decision, even though it's fun now. I'd rather have the reward on match day. So that's very fulfilling. So that gave me a very positive relationship with the game. And so that creates this world where I'm now way more often in the curiosity space, because the game isn't shutting me down. I'm not allowing the game to shut me down emotionally, to inhibit my learning. So all of this is to say, if you have a process, you can create all the guardrails. You can intentionally set yourself up to succeed. And if you don't have a process, you're just in no man's land. Where do you look to solve problems? You don't have anything to work off of. So that was a bit of a tangent, but yeah, process is everything.
Yeah, exactly. I just wanted to add something to that. So I've created like a very, very fundamental self-improvement guide for 1HP, for one of their resources going out hopefully soon. And on the bottom of the first page, I say very clearly in bold, it's like your goal is your compass, your system's your difference maker, because it's always really important to remember that everyone has the exact same goal. No matter who you are, if you're a winner or the loser, you have the same goal. Be the best, win as much as possible. The only thing that differentiates, just because you write the goal down saying, I'm going to be rank 1, I'm going to win VCT, I'm going to win the major, that doesn't mean it happens, because everyone's written that goal down. But if you really go and look through who made it and who didn't with the same goal, the answer is the process, the system, the adherence and the discipline to that system. And the curiosity to understand this system works for me right now, but it might not work for me tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. So how can I refine it? How can I make it better? And a lot of players end up stagnating in performance because they go, this works for me, so it's good enough. It's more than good. Like I encourage people to recognize where it's going well, but I always try and dissuade them from saying it's good enough, because the second you start making that phrase a habit, you're never gonna want to push yourself into an uncomfortable situation.
Yeah.
And the second you stop pushing yourself into an uncomfortable situation, you start standing still. And the second you start standing still, it becomes really hard for you to learn. Obviously, there's moments where you need to stand still, but if you really, really want to be the best, you need to move around a lot. But even once you become the best, now the goal then changes to I want to stay the best for as long as possible. So you can't stop. It never stops ultimately. And even when we look at that mental preparation side of things, I was reading Kobe Bryant's autobiography a month or so ago. He's like my favorite athlete. He's like my role model. And there's a very nice, very small snippet talking about his mental preparation is different every day. Some days he needs to be hyped up, so he'll listen to a lot like heavy music and rap and rock or whatever. Other days he needs to calm down, so he'll just sit quietly, read a book, be away from his teammates, maybe even go out to the court earlier than other people so he can just hold the ball. All these things, and I feel like players feel they can just rock up, turn on the computer, and the second the hands and keys are on their equipment, whatever is happening away from the screen doesn't matter. But it really does. And we never turn up to practice the same. We're never the same person after each practice session. We physically can't be, because that practice has either given us a positive emotion or a negative emotion. And then we will bring that with us into that next training. So we need to be very aware of it. We need to be so in tune with ourselves to know what we need personally, to then be positively contributing either to our individual practice or to the team practice. And all of these things kind of stack on top of each other, and people make it out to seem like, yeah, discipline, like if you just have discipline you'll be fine. Yeah, that is true, but discipline means nothing without curiosity, without awareness. I can sit here and I can play 10,000 games of Valorant and CS and whatever. I can play League, any game you give me. yeah, I might get better than when I first started, but there's no shot I'm becoming a pro. It's very unlikely I'm going to become a pro. And if I do become a pro, it's very unlikely I'm going to stay there for that long because I don't know how to take care of myself mentally, physically, emotionally, socially, all of these things. I haven't built those systems, and I haven't tried understanding those facets of my life. So it becomes really hard to truly learn.
It's interesting all the ways we get in our own way. There's
Mm.
something I'm gonna say. I'm just gonna put the cat outside because it's really annoying me right now. It's so annoying.
Bye bye, cats.
All right, okay, okay. Now I don't have a cat trying to climb up me constantly. That's very nice. But yeah,
Sorry, sorry, viewers.
what you reminded me of too is, I mean, honestly, I feel kind of bad for the constantly talking about Legacy by James Kerr, if you're familiar with that book, but it is obviously pretty great. And the stuff that you're talking about, the whole point of that book is that it talks about culture, and the purpose of culture is to really is to really create, let's say, character in every player that aligns and is oriented around the fundamental goal, which is to win. And so if that's like, if I was to like surmise it as, in a sentence. And so like character is kind of an important one. And it's really interesting. Everything that we have discussed all relates to character in some sense, because character is, I suppose one way you could describe character is that, you start out with your values. And so every team that you join will have its own values as a team. And also they all have values that they would expect of an individual person that is on that team as well, that they would want to encourage for you to align with them on. And then you also have to hold and honor those values through principles and through the execution of those principles. Like, the sweep the shed thing is the thing in Legacy. And for those of you that haven't read the book, basically it's the idea that the greatest, rugby team of all time in the world, like, these amazing athletes, the senior players and coaches will be the ones to clean up the locker room after, they got all muddy and it's, the game is over. They will do it because no one looks after the All Blacks except the All Blacks. And they're going to leave it as clean as it was when they first got there, because that is like this like operating standards value that they have. And through the execution of showing this through the leadership, it really encourages and habituates these principles, which that then turns into your character. And then now your character is now the base level of how you interact with everything. And so, character doesn't come from nothing. Character comes from you intentionally deciding what is important to you, how you're going to hold to that value, and then executing it over and over again. And so, similarly, when you're talking about like what makes a good athlete, especially talking about someone like, Kobe, like the Mamba mindset, Mamba mentality, like this is all about like creating the character of someone that wins. That's really ultimately what it is. And I think it just so happens to be the case that the character of someone who wins is also the character of like a very good person in many respects. For example, something that I think that like esports and just competition gave to me is the sense of losing and like losing and losing and losing and losing and constantly having to humble myself and not being ever able to hold this sense of myself that where I would feel like affected by the losing. Like, let's say my self-esteem would somehow be affected, because no, that's not what competing means. Competing means that failure, that you look at failure as something completely different. Failure is part of the experience of getting better. So it's actually the best thing possible if you can use it well. And that's what it is there for you to do, is to use failure to learn and to get better. And so that as a philosophy for life in of itself is profoundly impactful on people. And so that's why I think for me, I'm always a huge advocate of competition sports. Esports is primarily because of how those things affected my life personally. And I think that I see a lot of people that in different arenas in the world where they just can't lose. Like they'll double down on an idea, they'll double down on like lots of different things. They struggle to disconnect themselves and sort of their emotional responses from these things, because they don't have a frame where it is all about analysis, improving, learning, and disconnecting the sense of self and self-value to the outcomes of what's going on around them. So a little
Mm.
kind of side tangent, but I think that's an important thing to recognize, because when we're talking about these practices, if you're listening to this and you're really serious, or in any capacity serious about improving or being a professional player, you become a professional player by creating the character of a professional player, by creating the character of someone that wins. And to do that, you have to do the right things over and over and over again until it becomes who you are. That's what it is. So
Yeah,
that's my interpretation, at least.
like, so I read this book like this year, and I'll just put it up on screen here in case anyone's interested. It's called Expert Understanding the Path to Mastery by Roger Neiban. This guy's a
Ooh.
doctor and an academic, but the way he's written this book is absolutely beautiful, and obviously very biased because I'm an expertise researcher. That's one of the fields of interest of mine. So this book is really great, but he talks a lot about the value of mistakes, and I'm not going to be able to find the page directly. I wrote a thread on it on my Twitter account, and again, I can link that to you after. But ultimately, a lot of people are really bad at understanding what kind of mistake they're making, because we're going to make mistakes, and that's completely natural. We can't expect it not to happen. Even when we're playing, the major finals, and we're watching, whoever the best team is. Let's say G2, because I've worked with G2 in the past, so they spring to mind anytime I think of tier one orgs.
Mm.
Um, let's say even when they're playing, they're gonna make a mistake. Things are not gonna go according to plan, or they're gonna get outplayed. The difference between practice and kind of performance is, in practice, you're happy making mistakes, and they should be expected, and they should be encouraged, and they should be valued. In the performance zone, we're trying to minimize, we're trying to make as little mistakes as possible. But we can't remove it,
Mm.
right? And we need to understand that the type of mistake we make, we need to be able to understand, is it an honorable mistake? We tried to do something in line with learning and it didn't work out. Or are we just, doing things that like kind of like the dishonorable mistake where it's like, we didn't need to do this, but we did it anyway.
Right, like
Like
mental
that
game
careless, like
leaks
that
and
yeah, like, like, how many things are you doing, and how many you drop your standards to practice one day? That's a mistake that you didn't need to do. But if you came to practice with the standards and you gave it your all, even if you're feeling 60% today, you came in and you told, "Hey guys, I'm not feeling 100%, but I'm still going to give it my all," and then you made mistakes in practice. Fine, I can't, as a coach, I can't be upset, because I can't expect you to be 100% every day. We're not robots, right? And some days you're going to come into the match day and you might not feel 100%, and that's almost natural. And all of these like big words like failure, like losing, like mistakes, these all have a really really bad name. And the biggest thing is, we can't let them discourage us if we're truly in the pursuit of greatness, because we're going to make a lot of them, right? We're gonna make so many. You've probably experienced it. I've definitely experienced it. Even if we look at some of the greatest inventors in the world, or some of the biggest pioneers in any field, they've messed up more times than they've succeeded. Right? There's a great quote from I believe Thomas Edison that I always like to refer back to. He took 1,000 attempts to create the light bulb. He found 999 ways that didn't work. He only needed one way that it did work. And so every time I make a mistake, I'm actually really happy, because I now know what I can't do. So I've already moved up one level. It's not unconscious incompetence, it's now conscious incompetence. Or maybe I've decided that this actually doesn't work. So I should not be spending time trying to make it work.
mm.
Now, let's say there's 100 decisions I can make. There's going to be 90 that don't suit me in the way I want to play the game, for example, right? Roughly. There's going to be 10 that I really like. And then within those 10, I'll have three that I'm like, molto bene. These are my perfect plans. I can do this anytime, right? If I want to do it, I like, if someone gives me the opportunity to play this way, I'm happy. I'm laughing to the bank. And then there's seven which like range in my proficiency, but I'm still like relatively successful in it. So it's equally important to know what doesn't work than what works, because more often than not, there's more things that don't work than that does work for you or your team. So you need to be able to discover and explore all those things, and you need to be comfortable doing so. And that stems back from, are you actually curious in finding out what doesn't work, and testing the limits of the environment you occupy, or are you just, this pro does it this way, so I'm just going to do it this way because he solved it anyway?
Mm.
I think that often becomes a bit of a cop out answer, for a lot of pros, coaches, and organizations is this is the way things have been done, and that to me is like,
Yeah.
yeah, it might give you short-term success, but you're never gonna consistently find, success, even if it doesn't mean consistently placing first. But you're not gonna be happier in the environment. You're not gonna be more willing to buy into a process because all you've done is you've only given yourself short frames and you've never really found and taken the time to understand why we've come to the status quo. It's fine to be within it, and not everyone needs to innovate and pioneer the status quo and transform it. I'm one of the people who's trying to, but not everyone needs to be me, and other people have different intentions in what they want to achieve. But you still, I think you owe it to yourself to understand why the status quo is the status quo. And a lot of people kind of forget or skip that step.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very interesting one because it is very complicated to try to understand all of the things that are sort of in operation. And so from that point of view, I think a lot of people disengage because it's like, okay, I'm going to stick to what I know. It's kind of scary out there trying to like figure everything else out. And if you're in a pro level team, you might have the benefit of a good coach potentially, but you can, this is the other thing is someone asked me, I did an AMA on the Global Offensive Reddit the other day. And someone asked me like, okay, what are the most important like character traits for like a pro, and I sat there and thought for a while. And I was like, okay, I'm going to pick discipline. I'm going to pick self-reliance, and I'm going to pick social intelligence. So discipline because you have to like to be consistent with really anything, and to like deal with the human variation of I don't want to fucking do this today. you need to be disciplined, and that's important because like we said, repetition is important in all things. It's important in how you express your values. It's important in how how much time you put into the game and all these different things. Repetition is important. And then similarly, self-reliance, you have to be able to coach yourself. You've got to learn to be your own diagnostician. And wait, is that how you say that? Diagnostician? I don't know. You're going to diagnose yourself?
I believe so. I think.
And if you can't do that, then you are in this territory where it's like, now your development will be stalled because now there's a you're bottlenecked by yourself in that case for your own development. And then lastly, social intelligence, I thought was important because typically esports is very competitive and you won't succeed really if, in fact, you'll work against yourself if you're actively a dickhead or you don't know how to work with others. It's really important to build relationships and connections and to understand how to get the most out of the people around you, because typically we're in team environments, and even in one-on-one environments, if you're a 1v1 player, it's still important because you need to nurture relationships for practice. You need to nurture relationships for everything. It's something in life we can't get around. And a reference to this, where I first really dived into this idea as a truly important concept, was actually another book which has mastery in the name, and that is actually the title, Mastery by Robert Greene, which I'm sure you've probably encountered as well. This is a really great book, and there's a whole chapter on social intelligence, and it is using the case study of Benjamin Franklin, and there's also really fun anecdotes in there about his life and why he was, because he's actually a really ugly dude, but he had probably every STI under the sun because he's such a charming motherfucker and diplomat, and on top of that, he's someone that really was able to achieve an enormous amount just because of that very fact. And so it's, I think, something you can't get away from. So those are the three things I came up with. And I think there's obviously more attributes that are important. There's actually there's a book that I really want to read, actually, but it's by a Navy SEAL. I forget what his name is right now, but it's called Attributes. And it's essentially this idea that, there are certain attributes that people can have that are kind of inherent versus character, which is, something that you can kind of build. So that's an interesting one because everybody has different attributes, and in the SEAL teams, that's what they're really selecting for. They're trying to figure out who has the innate attributes to succeed in these most elite kind of environments. So it's very interesting when you think again about all of these ways that we get in our own way, because a lot of the stuff that you've talked about to me is about this like mental game stuff as well, because I had an experience talking about, let's say, self-limitation, where I had this mental game league that took me a long time to figure out, and it was really only because of eventually really getting into Jared Tendler's work, because explored a lot of different sports psychologists, but his system I found the most comprehensive and the most sort of true, I think, to 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 what the mental game actually is. And I had this fear of losing when I was playing my absolute best, and it's an unconscious fear that was happening. So I found that I was constantly, I would hit my flow state, my A plus game. I would get there, and I got really good at like consistently pathing my way to my best performances. But then after, there would be a moment when I would become aware that I'm playing like very well. And as soon as I have that awareness, I then start to drop out of it because it's like I almost don't want to do it anymore. And I was like, I can't understand it. It like doesn't make sense. And that's partially because it's emotionally informed, and it's informed by some fear, something in there. So I had to do all of this work and start to figure out, I'm afraid to lose when I'm at my best. What does that say about me? Then you go through this whole process where, you talk about, it's the CBT type of approach, the cognitive behavioral therapy kind of approach, where you talk back to the idea, you try to kind of, create the rational arguments against this thing. And then, as soon as you've developed the awareness, then when you get back into that scenario, you're like, okay, I know where the sort of first signs are of this. And now I can just immediately like talk back to it. And then also on top of that, reframe it so that I understand, I want to play my best, because if I don't play my best, then I will not ever know how good I actually am and what I need to improve. Like, it's actually the opposite of of all of my goals. It's what's happening. It's the opposite of all my goals.
It's like the monster under your bed at night is just a scarf, but you don't know until you check, right? And it's like when we think about it in our head, it seems so much bigger. But when we really take it out and kind of not quantify it, but make it look real, more often than not, it's a lot smaller than we think it is. And it doesn't mean it's not challenging and it's not difficult to get over and make it past that hurdle. But our head naturally makes things. It's like the mirrors on the side of your car, right? Objects may appear closer than it actually is. In our head, objects may appear bigger
Yeah.
than they actually are. And it's like, if this comes back down to that my, at least for me, my fundamental characteristic for any like expert is curiosity. Because if you're curious, you can develop awareness. Discipline is almost like a non-negotiable, because some days are going to be great, some days are going to be shit, and you just have to learn to deal with both of them. But if you're curious, you can at least go and say, huh, I wonder why this day went really bad when yesterday went really well, even though I did the exact same thing both days. And then now you can, start to demystify it, make it look less scary. And then when you see those first warning signs, you can talk to the problem and be like, hey, I see you, red light, please go away, come bring me the cuddly toy, not the scarf from under the bed. And it looks friendlier, you know how to deal with it, you're not stressed because you're prepared to cope with it. And you're in the challenge state rather than feeling threatened by it. So you can still be productive, you can still be functional, you can still then move forward. And you might not get the same gain, because each practice session they're not made equal, but you'll still push the needle in the direction you want to go. And ultimately, that's what all we care for is, are we better every day than we were before? And as long as we can stack those together, we'll reach our desired destination. Also, the irony with that is, more often than not, the closer we get to our destination, the further it gets away from us.
Mm.
We should never just have a static destination, because a lot of people will use SMART goals as goal setting theory. And there's been a lot of criticism recently, in the sense that, they set like a realistic goal, but the whole point of goal setting theory is not to have realistic goals. It's to have things that are going to challenge you. Because if you set something realistic and you fail, you're just going to feel like shit. And if you set something realistic and you pass, well, I expected myself to. But if you set yourself something challenging and you fail, you're gonna still end up further than the realistic goal. And if you pass, you've achieved something you've never thought you could do. Imagine how much motivation, how much joy that gives you, just without having any praise. And if you can bring in those intrinsic values, and you can make your discipline intrinsic, if you can make your awareness intrinsic, if you can become like a diagnostician, and you learn how to do it all for yourself, even when you have a coach, um, let's say the coach is really good, he amplifies your gain. But if you have a coach that maybe you don't align with, maybe isn't in the position to give you what you need, you can still be productive and you can still stay afloat, and you're not going to sink. And all of these things really like amalgamate, so to speak, to make a really good learner that then turns into a lifelong expert.
Yeah, like don't bottleneck yourself. If there is something that whereby you're bottlenecking yourself, it's probably not a good idea, or something to be addressed. So you said a lot of like really interesting things there. So the perspective thing I love, because I had a revelation with regards to this when I tried my hand at professional poker, and I did have a friend who was kind of coaching me, who was a very successful poker player. And one of the first things I realized when playing poker professionally, I mean, the first thing is understanding the difference between a professional player's mindset versus a gambler's mindset. And what's interesting with that is that to do that, you have to look at it in sort of the right scale. And so with poker, you might decide, I'm going to apply a specific strategy that I think works in the current metagame. But it's not like hand for hand. It's a sample size of hundreds of thousands of hands. And so the strategy only works if you apply it. Like, you're only going to get your kind of whatever projected ROI you expect, like your 50% ROI over the strategy, if you stick to the strategy. But if you don't stick to the strategy, then because you become emotionally affected, which is the biggest thing that happens in poker. It's like everyone has an intrinsic connection to money emotionally. And so when you lose money or win money, there can be emotional consequences, and those emotional consequences impact your perspective and impacts your decision-making processes, and makes it more likely you will go away from the predetermined strategic path. And so that becomes an enormous battle, and something that you have to be very conscious of when playing poker. And so when I went back into sort of applied these learnings into esports, I was like, oh, this is actually kind of mind-blowing, because it's actually quite liberating in a way, because this is a story of don't be outcome oriented. That's what it is all about. And so then if you're not outcome oriented, well, then how do you operate? Like you have to reprogram yourself, because we all start out that way, especially with video games. The whole thing with video games is you're supposed to actually you're actually getting rewarded with all the dopamine buttons for getting kills and for winning rounds. So that's where the reward is. And so it kind of almost makes sense that therefore that is the most valuable thing. But much like in poker, you can have the best hand that's going to win, 95% of the time against your opponent, but you get fucked out on the river or something, and they get that 5% out or whatever it is, and you lose a hand. Does that mean you should have played it differently? No, it doesn't. And so that is this like interesting thing that I learned, whereby I'm like, okay, my mind is doing all kinds of things to potentially kind of mess with me in terms of how I understand how I make decisions. So I have to try to reprogram, rewire myself so that I'm rewarding myself for a decision-making process, which I can control, and I can after the decision. And the decision isn't after the decision is after me deciding and making the decision. It's not qualified by the outcome. So then I'm like, okay, I'm going to judge myself and reward myself based on the quality of the decision. And so that is a fundamental, massive shift in how you approach improving at video games. And it makes you emotionally way more stable, because you're not feeling like your value as a player, as a person, is tied to your results now. It is instead tied elsewhere. And so you're going to have less emotions elicited because of that, because your sense of self is not under attack in any way. In fact, it's actually in a way healthier place. So that was like one massive revelation. And another massive revelation that is also connected to this, which also connects to your idea that you can be really close, but like perspective, it might look like you're really far away. Which with skill acquisition, it's kind of this way, isn't it? Because you'll practice things for like 2 weeks, and you feel like every day you're getting worse, and then one day you're like, oh, I'm okay. it's just I'm good now. It's just fixed. I never have to worry about it again. Which is like
magic sometimes,
It's so bizarre. Like everyone who's like competed and like practiced and stuff, you like have experienced this, and it's like so weird. It's such a weird thing. But the second revelation was through Jared Tenlo, and I got this from interviewing Elige in like 2017, 18 or something like that. And he introduced me to Jared Tenler and his work, and one of the concepts was the ABC game. And this concept is essentially that performance is a range. And just thinking about performance as a range, it encompasses your human variation, but it also more accurately represents you as a player, because you're not the same player on every map in every situation. You have different skills and capacities depending on scenarios, and the people that are the most consistent have the tightest ranges, because they have managed to slowly but surely target the right areas of their weaknesses and their strengths in the mid parts of their game, and they understand their game. And not just understanding your whole game so you know where to direct your improvement, but also understanding what is happening when you're in your C game. So what, where are you in your C game? And now, because you have this like frame of mind, not only can you accept, like, like psychologically, you can be like, oh, I'm in acceptance, I'm in my C game because I know that my performance is a range. I'm not, that's how I exist now. I don't think that I should be playing a certain way. I'm not expecting that certain things should happen. No. I can just accept that this is where I'm at today because this is normal, because its performance is a range. And so, I know my C game, I've mapped it out. I know my emotional mistakes typically in a C game. I know that, I know the kinds of mistakes. And so we kind of get into that similar territory as before, where I know the mental game leak, and you do all that work ahead of time to map it out. Like, what is it? And then you figure out what all the solutions are. And then when you encounter it and you have the awareness to know, I'm in this state right now. Now I have all of these things that I can use to kind of path my way back into my A game. And it's possible to do that. It's possible to do that. And Jared Tendler would always say as well, like, your goal should be that you can win a tournament in your B game. So the idea that you've done a lot of really great work on identifying your C game and then strengthening it so that your C game looks like a lot of players' A and B games. So that was another revelation that fundamentally shifted how I looked at everything in terms of performance in esports.
Yeah, I mean, there's two things that resonate deeply with me here. Is even connecting to your earlier kind of statement, where it's like, you're aware of how good you're playing, but you're still losing. You can play your absolute heart out and lose. You can play like absolute garbage, and you can still win. So ultimately, the outcome is more often than not uncontrollable. Not really uncontrollable because we're trying to affect it, but it's unpredictable. So trying to put a lot of emotional and like mental focus on it is usually a time sink. But then even secondly, like the worst thing and the worst feeling as a player when working within this A, B, and C range is when we're consistently doing worse than what's the average expectation for us. Right? So if B is average, A's are max, and C is like, lower than our average, we don't want to be doing less than average. Well, no one wants to be below average. Um, and that's like the worst emotional feeling. So working on those mistakes and coming back to this idea that development at its most fundamental level is I can either I can be better at what I do good, or I can not do as many bad. And like if we sharpen this left side, this bad side of the curve a bit more, we actually start developing consistency, because that variation between min and maximum has narrowed. So therefore, we are more likely to give at least our average performance on any given day, and then anything above our average performance is positively productive. And it's finding out how you then make your C game refined enough so it looks like someone else's B game. It's like if you look at an expert musician, you don't know if they've made a mistake unless if they've showed you they've made a mistake. But if he hits the wrong key, you don't know unless if he goes, holy shit, I hit the wrong key. Because he's so good at disguising those mistakes.
Yeah.
He's so good at rectifying and coming back on course. There's the great skit of the pianist who's playing the, like, I don't know, Fleur de Lis, I think maybe, or like one of the really like classical pieces, but he's got his sheet upside down. He's playing it, and everyone's like, oh wow, this is really good. And then he does like the big like Charlie Chaplin gesture, and then flips it back around, and then starts playing the piece correctly, and everyone realizes, oh wait, this guy isn't playing the right piece, but it sounded perfect anyway. Even though it's like obviously not the piece he's intended to play, but it sounds so good because he's playing whatever he wanted to play flawlessly. And it's coming to that conclusion. It's like, make your mistakes look like your plays. If you can make your mistakes look good, hey, you're probably a lot better than you think. And people need to give yourself credit sometimes as well. I think a lot of players are reluctant to sometimes give themselves or even their teammate a pat on the back, because they're so like hell bent on how can I get better? How can I get better? What's the next thing? That they forget to stand still and be like, yeah, this actually went really well today. Yeah, this maybe didn't go perfectly, but I like the intention, I like the effort, I like the enthusiasm in where we tried it. And yeah, these are the things that didn't work. Maybe let's find ways to rectify those. But they often just say, this was bad, this was not good, this is this, and they just forget to do the what was all right and what was really good. They tend to forget those parts of the review process, and I think when it comes to sustaining motivation, sustaining effort, you need levels of positive feedback, because theoretically, positive feedback is really good for promoting change, but negative feedback typically inhibits change. When you get negative feedback, you don't want to do something different. But when you do positive feedback, you're more likely to try and build on what you're already doing. And there's a lot of different ways that a coach or peers or even yourself can give feedback and gather that. And it's a really interesting area of research that I'm going to start looking into, especially as I start working more on the coach development side of things, because it's to me it's really boring when you come out of when I work in league. You know, you've played the game for 30 minutes, and the next 15 minutes is just spent with a coach just going through the VOD and saying mistake, 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 mistake. Okay, next game.
Yeah, yeah,
There's no praise. There's no, hey, this went well. How do we make it more consistent? Why did it go well? They never get to talk about and celebrate the small wins, even if we lost the game. And to me, it's just like, I wouldn't want to turn to training if all we're doing is looking at mistakes.
yeah,
It's too boring for me.
yeah. And it's there has to be like a counterbalance, because you can kind of like, so you made a point earlier actually about how, you know, losing, or you made a point, I forget what you said exactly, but it reminded me very much of this idea that when you're on a team, when there's consistent losing, there it's like a cumulative process. Oh yeah, I think you're saying, yeah, what you're carrying in from the previous day into the next day, you're talking about that. And so that reminded me very much of being in the team environment, like when I was at 100 Thieves, for example, and you know, you see the team, and you're observing that they're losing and they're losing and then they're losing more, and like this is like there's an accumulation of trauma there. Like, it's because it's traumatic. It's like actually traumatic to lose, especially if you're a professional player and you're losing. It's like your livelihood. You're literally putting everything, your very identity, your very, you know, self-value is tied into your results because you're a professional player. It's what you are, it's who you are. And so it is traumatizing in a way, and it's stressful in a way, and it's this negativity that will build up. And with a lot of players, you know, a lot of players are very young and they're not going to be emotionally super aware. It's not how it works, you know, unless some people are more in tune. But that's like very rare, I've found, at least. And so you've got all of these like negative things building up, and also not just that, you've got a narrative now that's also building up because we kind of, I think, tell ourselves, you know, we create stories. Like that's how human beings kind of exist. Everything is some kind of a story, and so, you know, you've got all of these results. Well, that's the basis of the story, and all these results say that we're losing and that we're not winning. And when you were mentioning the musician covering up for his mistakes, you reminded me also that in large part, I think, or part of the reason why maybe people won't notice that the mistake is being made is because they are perceiving an expert. So the person already, there's an expectation that person is already, you know, at such a level that whatever they do is going to be amazing. They've already kind of already decided on their experience. And so the musician would have to go quite far outside of that expectation to break the spell that is there just based off of the kind of cognitive bias that exists based on the context, which reminds me, I don't know if it was like the Milgram experiments, where they had people like in these lab coats, and they were trying to see, like, I think it was a Milgram experiment, but basically they had a testing authority, and they're like, okay, we put lab coats on these people, and we put them like in this room with like an actor, and then we get the participant to come in, and the whole idea is that the person who's participating in the study doesn't know it's an actor on the other end, and they're instructed by the person in the coat to basically deliver shocks to the person if they get like wrong answers on the test, and then the shocks like increase over time in strength, and then the shocks were getting to a point where like the actor is like, you know, obviously it's pretend, but is acting like they're in like a lot of pain, like a legitimate pain, and then excruciating pain, and it gets worse and to the point that's like very extreme. And the study was to try to understand how far would people keep going against their own instincts of like, I'm hurting somebody else because an authority figure is telling them to do so, because they're wearing a lab coat. So there is this sense of, you know, because we're programmed in specific ways to operate fundamentally in society and also as social creatures. So this is again like why all this stuff is interesting to me, because it's like all these connected ideas where where I think, we can look at that for ourselves and we can say, well, what is the narrative? What is the context that we're creating? What's the story that we're building? Because I think with players that are slumping, a lot of it is this fact that they're accumulating a lot of losses and there's nothing that they have to go against the overwhelming evidence that this is the story of who they are in their career. And that's a very difficult challenge to overcome. And then similarly, it actually works in the opposite. Well, it works. The principle works the same way, but in the opposite insofar as for winning as well. So you get this like almost halo effect on people that are winning a lot, where it's like they get this like fundamental level of belief in themselves that's actually outrageous. And I've experienced this personally. I think it was like 2006. At the time, I was on a team in Quake 4 when it had released, and there's only one other team in the world that could beat us, and everybody else that we played against, we just destroyed all of them. And it didn't matter like how far down or like how bad the start of the game was and how close it was. We always had unshakable. We just knew we would win. It's just like it was just this, and it's this power that you get only because you get all that evidence that you just win. And so it's interesting how these, I think, stories can create these like very strong inner beliefs that we have, that if we go back to that theme of getting in our own ways, that can really fundamentally change how we are able to perform. And if you go into a game with the expectation that your opponent's better than you, well, then you're already telling yourself a story that it's unlikely you're going to win. And so how much does that impact the curiosity, for example? How much does that impact the level of risks that you take if you feel like your opponents like deep down are better than you? It's the psychological aspect of all of this is really interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, there's also like self-handicapping, right? Like, oh, these guys are better, so there's no point trying. It's like it's just ways. It's like cop out ways to not feel as bad, or the not even the outcome, but the level of engagement and the effort you've put in. Because it's like, oh, we're slumping, so whatever. We're already losing everything, so I'm not going to bother trying to put effort and engagement, because even if I do, it's probably not going to change because I've built the story and this is the cemented narrative.
Yeah.
But you a lot of the times as an athlete, you owe yourself to try to change the narrative, and especially on the negative narratives, right? And in your case, when you're winning everything, it's being mindful of, okay, we're winning, but it doesn't mean we're untouchable. We're unshakable in our preparation and in our confidence, and we're going to approach everything like we can win it. But that we're also we're not expected and we're not owed the victory, and we still have to work for it. That it's finding those healthy balances that keep you pointing forward, but not tilting over.
Yeah. Astralis, I think, were sort of famous for that, because I don't think that another team, and also how familiar you are with their story in Counter-Strike, where they like won 4 majors back to back, and they're the only team I've ever really seen that had that fundamental approach very well understood and executed, and you can't achieve that without a very well defined team culture, I think, and that is very hard to come by in esports, especially because one of the things that you just mentioned about how people also let off the gas, this is like such a common thing. It's such a common thing, and it kills your gains. It's like it kills your gains. It's like smoking too much weed and you're trying to get bigger in the gym, and now you got less testosterone and your deep sleep is less. Yeah, you're killing your own gains. And that's a huge problem, because if you want to. And when I spoke with Dapper, Team Oxygen, like one of the things that I was praising them about was that it's super apparent. Like I was watching them, I'm like, hang on, I'm commentating and watching them, and what they're doing is there's these scenarios where one of their players could very easily, acceptably, just go and die here and just play loose and go and die and chase the kill or whatever. Like, and it's fine, they'll still win the round. But they were like very much. It's not just that they weren't doing that. It's the way in which they weren't doing that. They were choosing to have a value that their team operates on, which is we will suffocate our opponents and we won't give them a single edge. And this is a value that through our scrims, the principle is we practice every scenario in this way that we can. And then now the consistent standard is when we're in a pro match, our opponents, if we get, let's say we get a lucky start and we're ahead, we are suffocating them. And if you've ever competed at the high level, like that feeling can really destroy a team. It can take a long time to recover from that, and oftentimes it can be too long to recover from a start like that, where you're completely suffocated in that way. And because what it does is it creates scenarios where any spot where one of your players could maybe get a little bit of confidence or get a kill or like something, they just don't even get an opportunity. And that feels like I'm being outplayed.
Mm.
If you don't even get a chance, it feels like you're being outplayed to a level that's very intimidating. So that level of like focus on the right thing there, it makes a massive difference. But it's so sad how few teams exhibit these qualities in esports, I have to say. I feel like management and coaching in esports can improve so much. And I think people don't really know. Every team is very different. You know, funding, the game, like there's so much that's very different. But I feel like there's not a lot of light on any practices in any given team. I wouldn't be able to tell you how any team runs at this point. Now that I'm on the outside again, there's no sort of understanding of how any team runs, I think.
Yeah, I mean, from my understanding of generally just the sporting industry, most coaches are ex-pros, and again, don't think that's massively incorrect. I don't think it's best practice, but it's probably the most sustainable practice, and it's going to be really hard to explain why we should not only hire ex-pros. So I'm not going to bother going through there. But ultimately, these ex-pros, they don't understand. I don't want to say they don't understand, but maybe more often than not, they fall into the crack of they feel like they're the sixth player on a roster rather than the coach. So
Yeah.
they're very good, and all of these coaches are extremely good at understanding the game. They're really, really good at it, and I can't take it from them. Um, but when you're a coach, it's not about the what, but it's about how you coach that really matters. And they don't have that how skill. And I guess shameless plug. About 3 weeks ago, I started a company called Transforming Esports, and its whole mission is to enhance the way we develop talents. That's it. And the target audience is coaches and managers and performance staff. Obviously, players are more than welcome to come in and understand um, kind of the suggestions and things. And one of my big interests and one of my vested interests is understanding how we actually set up and design practice. So when you were talking with Matt from 1HP, he brought up the constraints led approach, and that's something I don't want to say I'm pioneering because you've been using it. You outlined ways you might have used it and outlined ways other Quake pros have used it. But I'm bringing it to team training. So I'll give you an idea that I've ran with FPS teams, and this is the session intention is playing like trying to get them to explore the different speeds at which they can play around. And the only constraint I'm giving them, and it's more of like a task constraint. A round in CS, and correct me if I'm wrong, is a minute 30 without the buy time, right?
Yeah, I think so.
From like active time, and then
I'll double
if you
check in
plant,
case
you have an
it's
extra
changed in
bonus.
CS2. Because I think it was 155 or 145 before. Let me see.
So something like roughly around that, and then plus 40 if you're planting, plus 40 from the plant. Um, Something we do, or something I've recommended coaches do, is
Yeah, 155.
break down the game. So let's say you have break down the round into 3 segments of time. So you can do 40 seconds to 1 minute 10, 1 minute 10 to 135, and then 135 to 155, for example. And then you can say you're going to get 2 points for planting between the first window, 1 point for planting between the second window, 0 points for planting within the third window, planting the bomb. And now you can then also say, I want you guys in the attacking phase, when we're on attack, when we're on offense, I want us to achieve 10 points. Now what you've done is you've got them to think about, can we plant faster? Can we plant slower? And you've given them incentives to just try different things. Ultimately, they still have to use the same skills, they still have to use the same fundamentals, but now what you're doing is you're helping them become really adaptable. So now when they come into these 100 different scenarios, they know how to problem solve their way through it. But I think a lot of coaches just forget to plan. They don't. They look at they come up with this really beautiful goal, and sometimes they don't even invite the players to join in on the goal setting process, which I also think can be a bit ineffective. But let's assume they've done that
Agree.
part. Once they have that goal, I don't think many coaches actually think, what do I need to do in training to ensure we adhere and behave as much as possible to interact with this goal? I think they just go, this is the goal. We're going to play the game. And then and if we get to interact with the goal, and every instance we interact with the goal, we're going to review it. So what we're doing is we're assuming that learning might happen instead of finding ways to assure and ensure that the learning happens. So the constraints-led approach is not only a novel approach to team training and ways you can develop communication, coordination, and even those tactical skills, but it's a way to help ensure that some learning happens. Because even if it's completely unsuccessful and that constraint doesn't, like, players walk away thinking, yeah, this constraint didn't really help me, then you can go, okay, how do we make this type of training better? And now all the players get to buy in, get to change how practice looks like. And then I guarantee you the next training, they're going to come be like, all right, I want to see how this works. We spent 10, 15 minutes reviewing it and trying to fix this way of training. I'm going to give it my all. I have had a piece of this pie. I've helped bake this cake. I'm going to enjoy it a bit more. And it's like, It's just these small little low-hanging fruits that a lot of these coaches either aren't aware or don't really end up being able to implement, that we need to start, like, or at least I'm really focused on trying to get them to understand and then make them feel comfortable when utilizing it. Because a good coach makes a big difference not only on the learning but the emotional journey of the process. And the worst thing for me is when players walk away from the process thinking, wow, what a waste of time.
Yeah.
To me, that's when I think I've done a bad job as a coach. To me, I think I've done a fine job, even if we didn't win it all, as long as my players can walk away thinking this was a valuable experience. It maybe didn't go the way I envisioned, but I do not regret it.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can ensure those things, not to say like I'm going to bed guilt free and without like things of like, oh, I could have done things better. Like, I'll surely be able to reflect and refine, but I can say at least I haven't done any harm to my players. And as long as that baseline fundamental is met, I as a coach can say I'm doing good things. And I don't know how certain I can say that for a lot of coaches, because even though they might be reaching success, every week I'm opening Twitter to 5-6 messages and twitlongers and threads of esports sucks, the standard of coaching is too low, god damn it, I wish I didn't waste these 2 years and I went to university, or I went and took this job instead. And I really want to help change that narrative a little bit.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'm a huge fan of everything you just said. It really reminds me a lot of, this is another, like, I think just fundamentally good way of thinking about things in life in general. For me, has always been, systems thinking as opposed to like linear thinking. So, linear thinking would be saying, just like essentially it's your description of a bad coach, where it's like, okay, I just want this outcome, so I'm going to just specifically get this outcome, go and get this outcome. So for example, let's say it could be, I want my player to turn up on time. So you could say, I'm going to incentivize them by saying, if you don't turn up on time, I'm going to punish you. I'm going to dock your pay. I'm going to do this or that, some negative consequence. Or, if I want my players to do extra work, instead of let's say creating a system by which I encourage them to do that, of their own free will, I could say incentivize them negatively and say, if you don't do, I'm going to give you all this extra work outside of practice, and if you don't do it, then this is going to happen. So these are like two fundamentally very different things, but one of them doesn't guarantee the outcome, but actually generally will create a better outcome if you're a skilled coach. And the other one guarantees that you essentially divest the player from the experience. You create this like bad faith engagement with them, firstly, so they're not going to trust you as much. And then secondly, they're not going to care as much. And so you're more likely to encourage the bad behavior because you're not incentivizing or motivating in the correct manner. And so the systems thinking is a lot more difficult because you've got to say, okay, well, how do I create a team culture in which, because that's the answer, is team culture, in which I create a likelihood that people are more invested in doing work outside and all these different things. And you just mentioned one of the like a really great way to do that, which was like, okay, I'm going to create a process that I'm going to, and you said like coaches should be allowing the players to be involved in the goal setting process, which I definitely think is true. It's not like the players are deciding it, but they have their input and they're actively investing and they're engaged and feel like they're a part of the process. So now they are incentivized and they're invested. And if you're going to do anything in a pro team, what do you always need? You need buy-in. So to have buy-in, you got to have trust, and you got to have investment, and you got to have ownership. This is like another like important characteristic of anyone on a team, really, of anything, is ownership of the process, the team, like everything. Even if it's the like quote unquote like least important or player with the least authority on the team, that they should everyone on the team should feel that way. So this is like something I think which is underlooked in coaching, that there are these more creative solutions to try to find ways to quantify the practice and move it in the right direction without resorting to the linear thinking. Because this is something that when I was with 100 Thieves as well, as in observing, I'm like, okay, the perfect coaching for me is that every scrim block, every kind of hour of the day has a purpose and in some intentionality where we're trying to get to some kind of an outcome. But it doesn't necessarily have to be that we hit a specific thing, but more so we are moving in the direction of where that outcome can be derived from. So for example, let's say, you want your team to have, let's say, you want your team to just play to try to win because you want to try to replicate the match environment. So maybe what you do is it's like, okay, we're going to get the whole office. We're going to get them all tuned into the scrim. We're going to get all everyone like sat on the couches watching. We're going to get, our players in there. We're going to treat it like, the veto, like we're in a match. We're going to treat everything like a match, and we're going to try to simulate the match environment. So there, the outcome is really just, I'm trying to simulate a match environment for my players. And that's there's no like specific outcome there because you can't guarantee really anything that's going to translate, but you're at least trying to do something whereby you can quantify some part of the intention, which is, I want to solve this problem that we're not playing like we do on match days, and I need to try to find some solution for that. And the solution is not like you said, which is just, we just need to like look at all the mistakes and say, okay, we have all these issues with the mistakes. So go fix those things. It's like, well, mistakes can come from mental game leaks. They could come from because the players don't give a shit, like, or the players are like underslept, or the players aren't eating correctly, or the players don't like each other, or the players don't, there's someone that has like there's an issue somewhere. And you're choosing to ignore the issue and not be curious. And you're choosing to just say, I'm just, there's a mistake. You're looking at just the outcome and not the process that led to the outcome. So yeah, there's my little spiel on systems thinking, because I think it's so important. And I totally agree with you, and I'm really happy that that's the step that you're trying to take the industry in, because I think it's absolutely needed. And again, because there is a lack of transparency behind the teams, and there's also kind of, I feel like if you look at traditional sports, I feel like people are way more savage in traditional sports. I feel like if like coaches don't deliver, like just the way that people understand the chain of authority and the chain of responsibility, I feel like it's taken way more seriously. And in esports, I feel like it's often in most games not taken as seriously as maybe it should be in terms of accountability. But maybe that's also because esports is more volatile in terms of the nature of the results. Like, I don't like, let's say a football match, is that got more inherent variance than a game of Valorant? Probably not. Football probably has like almost no variance. I mean, there's no variance basically, except maybe the weather and the pitch maybe, and like some of these small things, but it's not like, I've never played against this comp before. I'm playing in a different country, like a completely different environment. And in the game, there is inherent randomness, like first bullet inaccuracy. Like I could be accurate, but actually just not actually hit them, and I die because the time to kill is really low, and that fundamentally changes the round. Like there's like so much, randomness that doesn't exist in traditional sports. So maybe that's part of the reason. I don't know.
I don't know. That's a really interesting question. I'm gonna ask my PhD supervisor this question because I feel like he'd have a very interesting answer. I think the randomness is attributed from different sources, but my understanding of the world and my understanding that we as individuals and we as teams are complex adaptive systems. I think those are inherently. I have not learned or I've not observed a difference in randomness. I think they both are equally random, but just due to different variables. Like similarly, like an F1 car, to an extent, it's pretty random. Um, it's not random when you're doing it like when it's just a car. But the second you put a human being in the car, there are random things that will happen. Um, so I don't know. It's an interesting way to go. Um, I'm going to sit on the fence with this one mainly because I don't have a good answer. But going back to kind of just like some of the things you said there, I think like when you talk about playing to win and then developing that, everyone from the office comes down, you have a crowd, you have spectatorship. This is also something like effective learning design, and it makes you feel you're like so representative learning design is like making you playing practicing how you play. And then effective learning design is basically, can you emulate the same emotions in training that you would in practice? There's a really really funny clip of Jurgen Klopp, the ex Liverpool manager. If you follow soccer or the British Premier League, they're going to I can't remember which team they're going to play, but they're playing at a very like vocal stadium. And oh, sorry, not Jurgen Klopp, Mikel Arteta, the Arsenal coach, and they're going to go play Liverpool. And Liverpool is known to be a very vocal, very volatile away stadium to be at. So what he does is he brings speakers and starts playing the chants the fans play to get the players more used to that emotional feeling. That's really cool. And something I do with like my training periodization when I was head coaching is I would follow like a traffic light system. So I would have red days, which is high intensity, high focus on execution. I would have a green day, which is like the lowest intensity out of all the days, and it would be a lot about exploration. And then I'd have a yellow day, which is like between the two, and this is where like my players. This is like I've designed time for my players to come in and say, "Hey, in this game, I think we should focus on this," and I will give other players chances to say, "Okay, I want you to design a training. Or I want you to come in with an intention. I want you to be able to articulate it, and if you can get majority buy-in with the team, we will do it. If you can't, we will do the predetermined session intention that I've chosen as the coach. But then I'm designing these things in so that on the schedule, my players know on Thursday it's a red day, on Monday it's a green day, on Wednesday it's a yellow day. So they know what mindset they need to bring in, and they know exactly what preparation the night before looks like. They know if we're practicing in the evening, how many solo queue games they're playing. If it's a green day, I don't really mind if they play a bunch of solo queue, but if it's a red day, I don't want them to play much solo queue because I want all of their energy there for that training. I was speaking to, I think she's back in CS now competitively, but we were speaking towards like the middle of last year, and I gave her some advice. And it was like, sometimes we can't translate what happens in training on stage. And I said, okay, what are you doing before training? It's like, oh, we just rock up whenever we need to, and then we play. I'm like, okay, cool, that's fine. But the closer you get to competition, why don't you all meet at a random location away from your training facility, sit on the bus, right? Sit on like a coach that you would take to the stadium, to the venue, and go there. And now what you've done is you've simulated that process. Then get off the coach, go to your like warm-up area, do your warm-up routine, and then go to scrim like you're treating it like an official stage game. Now you get to experience and you get to train the process of that preparation before stage.
Yeah.
But I feel like many people just aren't aware or don't think that these things are possible because no one's told them that coaching can look like this. No one's helped them learn that coaching can be done this way. And many people think coaching is just, I need to just tell them where they're going wrong and I need to be as right as possible.
Yeah, I'm in so much agreement with you because it's like there's so many things because okay, so so it reminds me very much. I recently made a video about like visualization. A lot of people don't necessarily really understand, I think, really how it can be used to its best effect. But kind of the idea is that your brain is not really able to tell super well if you are vividly visualizing something, the difference between that and reality. So if you actually get really good at that, and which does, I think, necessitate the fact that you actually do have to probably practice meditation. You've got to relax yourself. You have to get your mind in a space where you can vividly put all of your focus into the creation of this imaginary scenario. So that in of itself is a skill that requires practice, but that is, you know, in part how you execute this correctly, and that's part of what you're trying to do. The reason is, you know, that you know, when you go in your visualization, that you try to visualize what is, you know, what I want to happen, what could happen, what would be the worst things that could happen, is because then you kind of run yourself through a simulation, mentally preparing yourself for all these scenarios. So when they happen, it's kind of like we talked about before, to be honest, where we're, you know, there's so many situations where all you need is the awareness to notice something happens. And so the difference is that if you do the visualization and something is going wrong, but you actually did your visualization and something went wrong in sort of maybe the nature that you kind of thought and felt, and maybe even in your visualization practice, you're able to also summon the emotion of feeling uncomfortable. And maybe you're able to remember the feeling of other times where you actually had that same feeling before, and you're able to kind of transpose that into that visualized simulation. You get to this point where, you know, the whole issue when you're on game day, at least again, this is according to how I subscribe to Jared Tendler's philosophy, which I learned a lot of this from him, is that it's all about like distractions, you know, things being attention thieves, essentially. You know, just because what you've done in all of your practice and your training, and if you've done really well with your practice and your training, you're just executing that now. Like you're just in performance mode and you're just executing. And so your brain, you know, we talked about the unconscious stuff that you're programming in to become unconscious. All those systems should just be running without any distraction, any resistance, any interruption, any system interrupt. And then what you want to have is then the maximum bandwidth available for the conscious processes. So I'm, you know, perceiving things on the mini map. I'm communicating that to my teammates. I'm unconsciously problem solving. So like, you know, we're talking about the differentiation of where is the system 1, system 2 thinking the strongest, and what should be assigned to kind of what tasks. And then all that stuff is just happening. And so then what happens if your finite amount of attention is distracted because I'm looking up, oh, I haven't seen a crowd like this. I'm not used to that camera over there. I've never seen that before. Okay, this stage feels weird. This desk feels weird. Your brain is suddenly attracted and trying to give attention to the environment because there are so many new things in it. And so that's taking away from, just literally taking away from your mental horsepower, because it's being spent in other ways. And so what's difficult there is that can then lead to other problems. So now you're in a situation where if you have a mental game, if you have a reason that's either, you know, explicit, let's say you have been on a series of losses and you kind of need a win, or you have some maybe an inner you know, issue, like I described with myself, like having this fear of losing, that's kind of more deeper seated kind of personal issue. That stuff will start to appear because now you're in a very stressed state, and you're aware that you're not performing well. And when you're not performing well, it's connected to all of these negative things. And so now you've created that pathway. And so that's a dangerous place to be in, because that's where pressure makes people perform worse. And that's where the team starts to get quiet under adversity, and they're not meeting challenge correctly with curiosity and with, you know, that creative, positive energy. And so the visualization helps to ensure that you can be protected against those things to some extent. So you can just be dialed in and you can just execute. And you know, you're reminding me a lot of that thing with the bus thing, because you're trying to, it's like it's a simulation that you're kind of creating, where I'm going to get my players kind of used to doing these things. And I feel like it's kind of, there's almost like a placebo effect. I feel like, I bet with that, because just the fact that you're doing it, you know, even if the player's like, oh, this is kind of stupid, they're still doing it though. You know, they're still doing it. And even though they don't fully believe in it, like that still has an impact, I feel personally, because it's not just on how seriously the player takes it, but it communicates to the player what your team is doing and why they're doing these things. It's just, it communicates what your team is all about, and doing it with your teammates, even if it is a bit of a laugh, is going to have some kind of positive downstream effect regardless. So I'm a big fan of that. And I was also trying, like, I wanted to implement stuff like player-led practices and stuff like that to try to, as a solution for giving, you know, you give managers more time to do other things in those particular cases, but at the same time, you're training people to be team captains potentially in the future. You're training people in the team to be more invested, to take more ownership over the process. You're giving way more responsibility to the players. And if you do that, that is typically an issue that players have in a structured team environment. Is it's too structured, then they get disconnected from the process. And so I loved what you said about like creating the constraints of like, here's the point system. Now you guys have to like work it out. You've like gamified creativity in a way that the players won't even fully realize the benefits of that they will be better at creative decision making in the game. And by contrast, what a lot of coaches do, I've noted, and this has been apparent in so many different esports games, is they overstructure things, and then all your players get just they don't feel like they can break the constraints of that structure, because as soon as they do, even if they are a player that's more intuitive and better when they do that, it feels so foreign, and the team, like their teammates around them, are not expecting or used to that.
Yeah.
It's just, it fucks everyone. So
it wasn't on the presentation, man. You can't be doing it. It's not on the 4-step process the coach told me. Come on, man. Like, we're creative human beings, and there's 100 different ways to create a successful outcome. We owe it, like, again, we should be allowed the freedom to go explore those things. And one of my biggest gripes is when you're playing with like relative experts on a roster, the coach comes out and gives like a PowerPoint presentation of, this is how we should do this scenario. Why is there step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4? It doesn't matter. Just say, these are the 4 variables we need to be aware of. Go play and figure out which sequencing is the most effective for us. There isn't an objective truth, because each player will have different strengths and weaknesses. So how can you say for him this sequence is correct, and for the next person next to him? I mean, it also, I've kind of like, the point kind of slips away. I'm gonna tackle the visualization thinking. So Michael Phelps, obviously one of the best Olympians of all time, he talked a lot about visualization in terms of his training. And for him, it was like he's won before he's even stepped out on the pool, because he knows exactly what to do if his goggles fill up with water. He knows exactly what to do if he dives late. He knows exactly what to do if, for some reason his shorts come off, or if he has the perfect dive. He knows, he feels prepared. And for him, what that means is, when he's in a stressful situation, that like, if we physiologically measured him, so if we looked at his heart rate, the variance, the difference between his working heart rate and his stressed working heart rate will be minimal. And that physiological like consistency will have an emotional consistency, which will then have an action consistency, right? And coming back to, there's less mental leaks because he's visualized everything. And then, I don't think that the other point's coming back to me. If it does, I'll bring it back up. But it's like, when there's it's this too much structure, right? And even with player-led stuff, sometimes I want player-led practice, and I might say to the players, hey guys, there's no goal today, but I want you guys to do everything. I want you guys to draft, I want you guys to lead the reviews, and then all I will do is I'll just mute in the Discord, and I'm not putting my feet up, but I'll sit here and I'll just observe. I have nothing else to do. There's no burden on me to give feedback, to interact. And what sometimes it does is, I can just observe the true state, the true personality of my players, because I've given them autonomy. Who are these people actually? It's very different when there's an authority person supervising them. The power of surveillance has massive effects on how someone performs and how someone behaves. It's like when you call someone for a trial, they're gonna give you the best version of themselves as a person, right? Because why? The incentive is, I want to get the job, right? I want to give you the best version of myself. But in the second that you got the job, how many players have you seen? You've tried out with them. They're the nicest person on the planet. The second they get the job, they're the biggest pain in the ass.
Yeah, that's why I'm laughing, because it's like, I've heard this story so many times. Like, people complaining about this with trialing. Yeah.
And it's like and it's just the power of surveillance. And sometimes when the authority figure steps out, you get to see how they act. So
they also have nothing to lose, kind of, as well. A lot of them.
Exactly, and I've given them the power. Right? I've given them the power. I was like, I want you to be your true, authentic self. And then as a coach, if I understand your true, authentic self, I know how to interact with you. I know where you need to learn, and I know how to give you that learning points. And so there's this really great theory. Can't remember the sociologist, but he talks about surveillance and power and the influence of behavior. And in the gulags, you have the central tower, and you have all the prison cells around, right?
Yeah.
And then you have that one flashlight that goes wee woo wee woo. But what happens, right? When the flashlight comes to your cell, you ain't trying to dig the tunnel up. The second it goes away from your cell, you're digging, you're trying to escape. And that's what coaching feels like sometimes. Is when I'm observed, I'm the good boy. When I'm not observed, when I'm out of training, I'm playing 20 games of solo queue, and then when I come to scrim, I'm the perfect guy and I'm focused. It's how can we make sure, how can we outline good behavior and best practice for when they are, and how can we show that whether you're being surveyed or not, there are things you can do to help yourself improve, and giving them unstructured play. Like we talk about deliberate practice, there's deliberate play as well. How can we introduce that together to sustain motivation and create a knock-on effect for learning? How can we understand the way we position ourselves in the scrim? If we're the coach today, are we a friend today, are we just an observer today? Those all have significant ramifications to how a person will behave and interact in an environment. And if we can be really tactical with how we introduce those things, we can actually have an amazing and a really enjoyable process, which ultimately gives us the best chance to achieve the goals we set out. And
Yes.
that's the end goal, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. There are so many things I feel like they can be done to make coaching generally better in esports. It's interesting. I'm moving back into the Counter-Strike space where they are much more. I feel like they're in the most advanced space in terms of where they are with coaching, and I think Valorant is still at least a few years behind where CS is, which you kind of can't get away from to a certain extent because you're not going to get like it doesn't make sense even to a large extent to get like a coach in from like traditional sports, someone that has like years and years of experience. And esports and TAC FPS is still quite young ultimately, and so you've got all these players like you're saying who are having to kind of figure shit out, and it takes time to do it, and it also takes time to because like when I was at 100 Thieves, for example, like year one was really good, and then year two there was like some really big fundamental mistakes, and a couple big fundamental mistakes from me as well at the start of the year before we get into season. But then we're in season, and you can't really like make any fundamental changes again until like sometimes maybe even a year later. So it actually moves a lot slower than anyone I think would like because of the nature of how rigorous in season play is in most of these games, and so Counter-Strike has had the most time to develop and the most consistency too. I think the scene has had its moments of volatility, but it's been fairly stable in the right places. So you have these, I suppose, industry leaders, and Astralis was the first one like that. It was Astralis's run where they won the 4 majors back to back, where they had Zonic, who was doing obviously an incredible job as a head coach, and they had the sports psychologist that was with them at every event. Like they were setting these new
Large,
standards.
right? Was it Large Roble, I believe?
I forget her name.
Oh, was it a lady? Oh, I wouldn't know
I
then.
believe so,
I
yeah.
thought I thought it was Large Roble that worked, but maybe he did Vitality. I'm not too sure.
Maybe and maybe as well, like
No,
maybe
no,
a
yeah,
different
yeah. It
era of
was it
Astralis.
was it was it was Large Roble who was their sports psychologist during the 4 times, and then he moved to Vitality after.
Ah, gotcha. Okay, so when was Onic? Okay.
Hmm.
Who's the girl I'm thinking about then? Maybe she was like a different performance coach or something like that, or something else. But either way, having that structure that they did, setting up the team culture in the way they did, all these different things like that. Like after that, everyone's like, "Oh my god, this is a blueprint," and it still is to a large extent a blueprint because it's hard to follow and requires a lot of stability and good funding. You got to be able to pay individuals who are good to do good things. Otherwise, they'll go elsewhere where they'll get rewarded for their skills, because no one obviously wants to be paid for like half of what they feel like they're worth. That's a very shitty feeling for anybody. So I think that's another issue with esports, is that we haven't really found a great way to monetize. There are definitely some bigger industry-wide problems whereby teams aren't as profitable as they should be, in part because of how teams are run, but also in part because of how esports works very differently to to traditional sports. So hopefully those problems will be solved over time. But either way, I'm hoping to spend a lot more time speaking to coaches in CS, because when I was at 100 Thieves, I spent a lot of time talking to Threat, who was NIP's head coach for a long time, obviously ex-pro and pretty renowned, and he learned a lot from getting in like people from the Olympics and various other places that had a lot of coaching experience, and was trying to bring those practices into what he was doing with his teams as well. So it's been very interesting to have some of these conversations conversations in such a nascent industry. So I guess you're in a place where I've been always with esports, where it's like it's very exciting because everything's so nascent, but it's also like infinitely frustrating because everything is so nascent, like, and so lots of shit's not
sword.
happening. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So okay, what do you think then is? What do you think is the best? Okay, let me rephrase this. What do you think is the most important aspect of performance? Like, if is there like one thing, like for example, because in our conversation, I could look at it and say, okay, I think a theme is focus. I think focus and attention seems like maybe the biggest theme, and so many things connects to it. Like sleep connects to it, and learning connects to it. Your ability to pretty much do anything, like having that in the right place connects to it. Your performance on the day connects to it. We talked about visualization. All these measures we're putting in place to make sure that this is an undeterred, undistracted effort, so we can just execute. It seems like focus and attention are very important, if not one of the most important things. And so, if you agree, a follow-up question would be, what can we do, if anything, to enhance our brain's ability to have a greater capacity for attention and focus? If you agree, of course, that it's one of the most important aspects.
So I do agree, but I think it sits level. I think ultimately in any sporting context, because especially if you're playing a team sport, these are very just football, basketball, I mean soccer, American football, whatever you want to call it, like all these sports, and then all these like the big three esports that I highlighted, they're just complex puzzle games. So yeah, focus and attention are amazing things to have, but I think ultimately the number one thing that sits at the top is your ability to make decisions. And I think everything else you do either supports it and reinforces it or hinders it. So if you have bad sleep, you'll have bad focus. And if you have bad focus, you have bad ability to make decisions, right? And if you have bad abilities to make decisions, if you make bad decisions, you have bad outcomes. If you have bad outcomes, that feeds back into, it undermines your confidence. If you're too worried about you're too worried now because you're not feeling as confident as you do in your best performance, your lack of focus, which then affects your decision making, which then and your downward spiral that way. And then similarly the inverse is true, right? You sleep well, you eat well, you incorporate some level of physical activity, you develop yourself holistically. Not only is that great for short-term focus and attention, but it ensures that you can be focused and attentive when you become 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32. I know people who are 35, 36, 40 who can play video games better than these 18-year-olds, mainly because they know they can give you the right amount of focus when you ask them to. I am so confident if we broke the stigma of age actually matters in esports, I can find you a team of 35 to 40-year-olds who are so dialed in, they will learn the game from scratch, they will reach the apex tiers, and they will outperform the hotshot 18-year-old that's just been playing from the womb.
All right, I'm ready. Sign me up.
And grew up with the iPad. Right? Like I like that's the thing, right? And your ability to make rational and well-informed decisions is the ultimate thing that leads to good performance.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've noticed so I've noticed that for me the age thing, a lot of the stuff that I expected, okay, more responsibilities, that hinders the amount of like time you have in comparison, less neuroplasticity, so that and obviously there are like ways to maybe increase like brain derived neurotropic factor and like all these like things for exercise, various things. So there's definitely like mitigating things you can do when you're older to mitigate these ideas. But what I have, I think, been the most surprised about is actually more so the toll of life as an adult. How fatiguing life can be, or how the increased amounts of stresses, which then means that you need to be a much better and managing like these negative outcomes, making sure your sleep is good, making sure that if you need a meditation practice, a breathing practice, that you do that. You need to have measures in place because for me the biggest limitation is always like fatigue And it's and then, as you say, like then my decision making is going to be a lot worse because I can't as effectively leverage the experiences I'm getting into learning. So this is actually why when I came back in 2017, I've been away from competition for a few years. I got to my highest peak ever, and within a very short time, even though I was away for years, because I already have been very good and played at a professional level. So it's really just about having a good training regimen. And I surprised myself with how good I was at that time. At that time, I was outperforming like the best players that that had been playing still in the time that I was away, and before when I was playing against them like years ago. They are some of the best players in the world. So like I'm definitely worse than them, but I was able to play and match up against them significantly better and be better than a lot of them at that time, just because I had such an insanely disciplined and sort of effective approach, which was managing all those things really well. My approach was, and I mixed it up on day to day based on just some principles. Like, okay, we're going to have specific cutoffs for caffeine. We're going to use like caffeine, for example. We're not going to use it every day. We're going to use it on specific days so that it's actually going to confer a more significant focus advantage when I need it. We're going to have sleep routines whereby there's like prep for sleep phase. That's 2 hours before sleep, and the activity I do 2 hours before is different than the activity I do 1 hour before sleep. I like nail down consistent times when I'm exercising. It's consistent. The type of training is there to help me, be a better player that I'm doing as well. The way that I'm breaking up the training, the amount of hours that like all of the constraints that we talked about. I was doing all these things consistently for 2 months, and it had an extremely potent effect on my ability to perform. And none of those things would have been possible as a young player because I didn't have the emotional maturity. I didn't have the awareness for things. I wasn't as sensitive to my own experience. So I'm not getting the data to be able to leverage in that way. So that's what I found as an older, more mature player. And we're seeing, I feel like a lot of older players still able to execute, mechanically speaking, very, very, very well. And from like let's say Rafa, for example, or a lot of the Quake players, like there's a German player that was like when my first ever competitive match ever in Quake 3 was against this guy in 2003 or something like that, and he's still playing today and still able to win tournaments. He's still extremely good, and he's older than me, and he's always been good. He's always been exceptionally good, and he's improved. Like all of the older players I've seen from those early Quake days that are still playing, they are getting better actually over time. And I found that to be really interesting because we are in the live experiment because you're right. Like everyone thinks that, and it's so funny because people's justification is usually reaction time, which is obviously it's kind of yeah.
Please tell me why Fernando Alonso, who's 41, is driving a vehicle going 300 miles an hour,
my God.
and no one's biting an eyelid about that. By the way.
That's a great point. So there's a lot of interesting stuff there. I saw recently them breaking down the physical impacts of that sport. I would be so fascinated to see how it's affected his body with the amount of driving he's done, because apparently I didn't know this, but because of like their level of heat, like obviously when you're in a sauna or something, if everyone's ever experienced that, or in a hot bath, your heart rate goes crazy, it goes through the roof. And so basically they're in a sauna for like 90 minutes at a time, and their heart rates are going at like 170 consistently throughout that, which is actually more than people that are like professional like runners, like running and like massive distances for prolonged periods of time. The F1 racers have significantly elevated heart rates compared to them, and then they've got all these like the massive amount of G-force operating on their body, like with all of these different turns. They're like then the strength that's required of their necks, and I'm sure there's got to be like internal issues as well. I think that's a study that's going on at the moment, is to discover, is there heart damage sustained by the G-forces that are on repetition, because something's got to be going on. So I would be really curious to know like how his body is dealing with it, because it's so significantly physically demanding, and I think it's hard to imagine that. But that's a great point. Yeah, he's 41 and he's that's really interesting.
I don't know, like. And like our body, like again, like I said at the start, esports isn't it's barely physically taxing. It's physically taxing in the sense of, it's sedentary and all those things. When you stack it up against each other, and like bad lifestyle is promoted through esports, the perception is still hunchback in a dark room eating Doritos and Mountain Dew. That's still the societal perception of esports athletes, and
Yep.
whether it's fair or not is not for me to say. I think it's definitely improving, but if 18-year-old players, I think as you go through life, you through the shit you experience, you just understand that no matter what happens today, the sun's gonna come up tomorrow, and life's gonna start again. Like life's
Yeah.
gonna keep going, and that's what helps older players be really like disciplined, and that's why younger players are typically not as disciplined because life hasn't kicked them down that much yet,
Yep.
right? And I'm
Yep.
not saying it hasn't kicked them down at all, but it's just I have 8 years more experience of getting my ass beat than you do by life. Simply like if I was compared to like an 18-year-old. Um, so I know what it takes to be disciplined. I know what that looks like for me. But if players just were more curious and were more accepting of, hey, I need to introduce physical activity, and that doesn't mean I need to go bench 225. There's studies that show the positive effect a 5 minute, a 10 minute, and 15-minute walk can have on your ability to cope with stress and pressure. And then it shows all of those things can also help focus, can help creativity, can help critical thinking, can help decision making. I can give all this objective information to an 18-year-old and they go, nah, I just want to play the video game. I'll become good by doing that. And
Yeah.
it's like at a certain point, it's like
Yeah.
how allergic to knowledge and information and best practice can we be as an industry? I think that to me is the biggest frustration.
I actually made a video not too long ago that was actually quite popular with a few coaches. They reached out to me about it, and it was entitled, "What are you not willing to do?" Because I sort
Mm.
of define a lot of success on that, because I think a lot of people don't acknowledge really what then they're not able to be honest with themselves to say, what am I not willing to do? Because most people don't, they're not wanting to consciously, explicitly recognize where that comfort zone is for them, because they want to stay in it. It's like, it's kind of mind controlling you to like not think about these benefits you would get for going outside of it. And I think the exercise thing is interesting, because I thought about this for a while, especially when I got onto the team end for with 100 Thieves at the beginning. I was thinking more about some things I didn't put as much emphasis on previously, which was stuff like, how important is fitness? Like if I'm going to have a team, like how actually important is it? Obviously we know that it has lots of cognitive benefits. Well, that's also hard to define what that actually means. What is that? It's hard to say how that interacts with esports at the very least. There's not really any studies in esports, largely speaking, on these things just yet.
There
So,
are,
oh, go ahead.
don't want to interrupt, but there are a few studies coming out now. So the
Oh,
university I'm
nice.
going to, um, a PhD student has just completed all his studies, and I believe is in the process of preparing his defense. His name's Mitch Nicholson, and I'm happy to make that connect. But his study was looking at the benefits of introducing physical activity and exercise on the performance aspect of esports. I'll send you his papers through because do you recognize the name Dunk? XTSM
Yes, it
employee.
rings a bell. I don't really know much about
He
him, but it rings a bell.
he called out saying, "Is there any evidence behind it?" And I encourage Mitch to share his findings. I'll send those over to you.
Mm.
Have a read. Maybe it comes to a video. Maybe he's a good connect to have to dive into it. Um, but there is more and more research coming out of it. And equally, my secondary supervisor, he's an exercise physiologist, in looking interested in esports as well. So more people are starting to find contest specific data to show the value of it. And I
Mm.
think I hope I haven't disrupted your train of thought, but I think a lot of people look at physical activity and exercise as in I need to be able to run a marathon. It's just get your body moving more than
Just,
it
yeah,
is
doing
now, and that
something.
will give
Yeah.
you just move your body. And like G2, the League of Legends team, they play spike ball before their games. They play spike ball before training, if you know what that is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's fun. That's not super physically taxing. It's not like that high barrier of entry to be able to play it. You need the net, you need the ball, and yeah, you're gonna mess up a bunch of times at the start because you aren't used to playing sport, but you'll intuitively the learning curve is pretty fast. That is enough to get a lot of the physical benefits. If you add cardio, like genuine gym, like cardio and weights, you'll get accumulative benefits, but it, it's it's good to have if you can get someone to guide you through it, because it's not
Yeah.
the most attractive thing to engage with, the gym side. But if you don't want to engage with the gym, and that's where you say, I'm not willing to do this, you should be willing to at least go outside for a walk without your phone, or maybe just put on a podcast and walk away, and not be sat on Twitter and walking around, your neighborhood watching the next best clip, because you're not getting that rest you need, and you're
Yeah.
not getting the physical activity properly either.
Yeah, yeah. I think so. What you mentioned there, I think, is really important because also this is the other thing I think, like I was saying, where what does cognitive benefit mean? It seems kind of broad. What type of exercise? Because that's very broad. Because for example, there you're saying that, hey, there's a minimum effective dose here that's actually very achievable. Like 3 times in the day, like a player could go, I can get them to walk around after a match or something like that, and that's going to confer some specific types of benefits. That's going to help them to recharge, or like whatever it might be. And I think it's kind of interesting because it, like you say, there's, depending on the type of exercise that you're trying to do, there can be different potential benefits. One of the biggest benefits that I found personally, and I think this is interesting because I think people tend to think, will the benefit, if I do this thing, will it like give it me this like will I just become a better player? Like, is there like this direct correlation? I don't think that exists, but I do think that the things that it does help with are pretty significant. So, for example, with exercise, there is a let's say if you're doing hard exercise, so like you're really challenging yourself. You're trying to run fast, you're trying to run fast. At times, you're actually pushing yourself quite a lot. There's a mental resiliency training that you're doing there, which is very effective for yourself, because when you're doing that exercise as well, it does recharge your mind in a way, because you can't be like scrolling through your phone as well when you're doing that kind of thing. There is this element of how that is like very good for your mind to be able to do that and to spend that time with yourself and to allow your unconscious to be able to bubble up through that process. Lots of runners talk about how they get really creative, and I experienced that as well when I did like loads of running. Like it's very meditative activity, at least anecdotally is what I experienced. And then similarly, if you do that with your team and you do it exercise to a degree that's quite dysphoric, there are studies that back up that dysphoric activities, and exercise is an easy dysphoric activity to go to, does have a significantly greater impact on team bonding than doing something like a dinner, like something that's a reward, something that's positive. A negative experience together is significantly more powerful for team culture than it is to do the opposite. So that's another interesting idea for exercise and how that can be integrated into teams. And then lastly, I will say, it's related to the mental resiliency. We've talked a lot about emotions because it is such a huge underpinning factor to behind everything with performance in esports, because it's so cognitive. And exercise has been shown to be significantly powerful it's much better than in any pill that you can take on the market that a psychiatrist may give you for depression. And like managing your emotions becomes significantly easier if you have these physical outlets. And that's something that is very well studied, is very well known. And because we know it's a very emotional activity where we're going to get stressed, we're going to be put in environments where we're going to have adrenaline pumping through our body, all these different things, having our body in good condition and exercising so that we have a way to mitigate negative emotions and have a higher barrier for those negative emotions to impact us, because we're so used to being in that dysphoric environment. Now I'm like, oh, this is actually a massive benefit if the player wants to go get it. But there will be people that actually fucking hate it. So they'll hate their lives. And that was the thing I ran into. I'm like, maybe it's not worth it if the person genuinely doesn't like they're genuinely gonna hate it. Like then they're gonna have a negative relationship between you, the coach, who's trying to get them to do this thing, and now they're gonna have a negative association with all that stuff. So is it better to like leave that person alone? I don't know. I'm not sure in some of those circumstances, because there are players on teams that are really unhealthy and they need to exercise.
Yeah, I think you need to meet them where they are. Or I think a lot of the times, at least in my experience, is when someone hates something, it's not because they hate the concept or the benefit. You just haven't given them the right treat.
Right.
Right? It's like, if you have 4 people that likes a lemon tart on your team and one guy who likes a tiramisu, you can't give the 5th guy a tiramisu, or like the 5th guy a lemon tart. But then what you never need to do is like, okay, We got 4 people in this bucket. We got 1 guy in this bucket. Is there a middle bucket that everyone agrees upon? Is everyone actually also likes chocolate cake? What does that look like? So no one's getting what they want, but they're getting what they need still, and everyone's happy with it, and they can make their peace with it. And sometimes, at least in my experience, no one if it's this extreme case of one guy absolutely hates it, no one likes being left alone, especially if they can see like their teammates actually enjoying the other activity, even if they're getting challenged by it, right? Going on a run or going on a hike, and we're all out of breath at the top, but he then can see like in the group chat of photos being posted of everyone in the team and he's not there. That can actually have a really big emotional change, saying, fuck, I wish I was in that photo, I wish I was in that memory. I'll go next time. I might hate it along the way, but at least I reached the top. And then on the way down, my teammates are, picking me up, and they're like, yeah, man, thanks for coming, and we really glad you came. It was such a nice experience. And then that slowly helps take him from a motivation to maybe a bit of extrinsic motivation. Like, oh, I'm doing this to get praised and liked by my teammates. And I was like, oh, my teammates like it when I engage with them. I'm going to go out of my way to find ways to engage with them in this physical domain. And now, oh, wait, what's happening? I actually want to go do exercise. When 2-3 months ago, the thought of exercise made me puke, and I went and instinctively ordered a McDonald's to like fight the power. But now it's like it's these small changes that I've made, and the fear of FOMO is amazing. It's pretty transformative, and I'm not saying like coaches, players, don't be like, don't exclude a guy. Don't say I don't want you to come, but like if he's not coming, and if it's really push comes to shove, be okay with leaving him alone and letting him make his own peace with the fact that I'm missing out on good fun time with my teammates. And that a lot of the times is a big change for a lot of people as human beings, because we are social creatures. So we want to be around people, even if we are the biggest introvert or the most awkward person in the world. We still do enjoy those moments of social activity and social interaction. So they will find that way to build it for themselves a lot of the times.
And I suppose as well, players will have different tolerance also to changes. And so some people will be very welcoming to trying something new, and other people will be more just personally resistant. And I think it's we talked earlier about the importance of trust and buy-in, and players being able to be vulnerable in the team, and having and also we didn't talk about this specifically, but I think that as a coach as well, like having it be the case that individual players have space to individually connect with either you or an assistant coach or a performance coach, or like having somebody on the team. Like for example, when we were working with Ryan at Adamas, he was the one doing the one-on-ones with the players. I was doing one-on-ones with them as well, but it was in a different capacity as a general manager to the capacity for Ryan, where it's going to be more about like checking in, like, hey, how you doing, like understanding the individual, which you did talk about previously with your observational days where you get the players to run stuff, and then by like learning who they are, you're able to interact with them, and I think you're right. I think it's probably the case that some players you'll always need to establish the trust and vulnerability, but once you've done that and you created that environment and the benefits are really clear, then it might just be the case of, in one of those one-on-ones, you're talking to you get to talk to the player, and you can like talk about that thing. It's like, hey, I noticed that this is something that you were not into, like, and you can kind of explore it with them. And if they have the trust and vulnerability, they'll probably open up, and maybe they'll suggest an approach that, hey, this approach just really makes me feel uncomfortable, but if we did it this way, or if we did this other thing, that would like really, really good for me. And you can kind of work things out. And I think, this is another thing in esports, just from a theme. I think that we need, it's going to be really powerful once more teams are better at really getting all the data from the players and being able to understand how to integrate it in the correct way. But if you are in that mode, like you were discussing, where you're just like trying to force these outcomes, and you're thinking like very much in a very, very limited focus, then you're never going to get there. So you'll never be able to get to the bottom of anything, and players will start to get discouraged over time. And I've always wondered if that's part of the reason why teams like blow up in esports as often as they do. or if it's something else. Is it bad coaching and management, or is it something else that's more normal to esports? I'm not really sure. Do you have any take on that?
I think teams blow up in esports because they reach this point where they can't stand each other a lot of the times.
Do you think
You
that's
know, they're
because
like,
of
I don't
losing
want
though?
to.
Like you just can't.
I don't think it's even because of losing. It's a lot of people. I guess it's natural. People don't like when people disagree with them, whether it's like philosophically, logically, whatever. And another good book is it's called Surrounded by Idiots, and it's all about
Oh, I've
social
heard of that.
psychology.
Yeah.
And in the book, the author frames the word idiot as someone we don't understand. So
Nice.
idiots
Reframing.
aren't always idiots aren't always people who are wrong, although sometimes they are people who are just wrong, and that's fine. But we normally call people an idiot because we don't understand why they've reacted this way, because
Mm.
we wouldn't react this way. And again, a lot of players aren't curious about understanding their teammate. They view their teammates as commodities to success. They don't view them as humans sometimes. And and it sounds
Mhm.
really weird to say, but like in the tier one scene, I hope it's better, but my knowledge of esports indicates sometimes it's not better. Um, but I've gone through splits where my two teammates don't even know the first name of each other. They don't even know where the other person's from. And I've made it a point where it's like, okay, we're going to be on a first name basis with everyone. We don't need to be best buds, but we need to know each other. You know, I want to,
Yeah.
one of our first team meetings will be, all right, give me an introduction to yourself. Tell me where you were born. Tell me what your hobbies are outside of esports. I know it feels like kindergarten, but all of these things are really important to develop, that fundamental trust and the fundamental comfort to be vulnerable around each other. And once you've achieved those, you can then have those uncomfortable conversations when they're necessary to rectify the direction of your system of your team when the going gets rough.
Mm.
But a lot of the times when the going gets rough, and it's like if you've I'm assuming you've watched Moneyball. It's like I don't like to
Yep.
get personal with the players, right? And it's like it makes it easier for me to cut them. And a lot of players think that way as well. It's like I don't want to know this guy because the second he starts throwing my games, I want to be able to go to the coach and be like, bench this dude, please.
Yep.
Like a lot of and
Experience
they
that.
don't understand, and a lot of players don't really understand. Like if I get to know this guy slightly deeper than the surface, then I can help him feel confident when he's playing a C game. But a lot of players just don't want to put effort that way. They
Yeah.
all just want the player who knows, who's mechanically apt, and who's technically or technically sound, and they just want four other peoples that think and play like them, and that's it. They just want to rock up, play the game, only talk about the game, and then fuck off and live their life. And by live their life, they just want to go play solo queue and stream or whatever, And I
Yeah.
think it's I think performance in a team setting is so much more nuanced than just training together. It's living, not like living in terms of a house, but like living, experiencing, spending time together. Um, Even if it is, after training, going and playing pubs as a five, and you guys are all just fucking around. That's good time. That's really, really valuable for performance. It doesn't seem it, and it might not be productive in terms of learning, but you can crack jokes with your teammates, you can get to know them a bit better, and you can, when the next training session goes to shit, hey, well, at least we're going to go after and laugh about it instead of we're all just going to leave training, go into five separate rooms and stare at the wall thinking, God damn it, I hate this dude. He ruined training today. And now you can accept the mistakes and you can accept the human qualities of your teammates, which I think a lot of people try and run away from, or a lot of people try to even demonize sometimes. I feel a lot of players feel guilty for just having human emotions, and they're made to feel guilty that way. And I feel that's so incorrect.
Yeah. Yeah. This is actually something that's really, as definitely get some a few points there. One point is I wonder how emotionally unintelligent people are on average now versus maybe 10, 20 years ago, for example, because it's a kind of a weird one because societally speaking, I think people are spending a lot less time socializing. You can chalk it up to social media, COVID, like whatever, but there is definitely some evidence to suggest that there's less time being spent developing in that way. And then also you add in like the type of person that gets really good at a video game. Well, they're also spending a lot of time playing the video game on the computer in their bedroom where they're not getting social experience in a social environment. So they're not really spending much time being socially intelligent, which is interesting. I think there's other interesting points here, but that I won't go into that are a consequence of that. But I think that probably proposes more of a challenge when you do, because then when you make it to a tier 1 team, typically you're going to be, I mean, the standard for most is going to be, well, we're going to be not necessarily a team house, but like we're going to be in an office, something, we're going to have a practice room, we're going to be there in front of each other
in person.
and in teams, one of the most important things is conflict resolution and being able to have healthy conflicts, like these things that do actually require social intelligence or practice or experience. And if you have been let's say if that's been completely neglected and you just don't have the reps on that, then you're in those environments and you're young, you're probably going to be very uncomfortable with certain types of expression, and that's quite difficult for a coach to tease out correctly. But it's not impossible, and it does, I think, emphasize the importance of coaches to actually be coaches and not friends, but do it, but make sure the dynamics are correct. And I do wonder with that, like how much ground can be improved upon by having the right structure, because most teams don't have the necessary resources. They can get one head coach and that's it. And so you got to be like, well, are we picking the head coach because we need the strategic direction? Do we need this? And most head coaches that will be available will, kind of like you described, I think, be pretty good, probably very adept at being able to understand the game and analyze all of those things. But in terms of managing people and understanding people and navigating conflict, and not just navigating conflict and resolving it, but empowering them to grow and learn how to do it themselves as well, that is in of itself is quite a big ask. And so that might also be another reason why teams blow up as well, is just the inability to handle conflict, which means therefore tension builds up over time, which can only result in an explosive finale at some point, I suppose. So that's an interesting challenge for coaches.
I think there are three things that can be said here. So the first is, yesterday I put out a question just to Twitter to anyone who wanted to answer, and I asked them, what is one characteristic that makes a good coach? And all they had to do was fill out a survey, and in the survey there was one mandatory question, and that was, what is the one characteristic, and then they could give me two other characteristics if they wanted to. I got more than enough results, so I kind of compiled it together, and we got 156 responses in total, like 156 answers from 52 different people. And there was like 91 or 92 unique characteristics identified. The number one characteristic, the most common characteristic that came together, was empathy.
I was going to mention that, yeah.
And as even though that's valuable for a coach, I think that's equally valuable for players. Secondly, I think a lot of players don't understand that the role of the coach isn't always to tell them what they want to hear, but more often than not, it's their duty to tell them what they need to hear, and more often than not, what they need to hear and what they want to hear are on two different ends of the spectrum, more often than not.
Yeah.
And thirdly, conflict isn't a bad thing. Conflict is the necessary evil of high performance, because if everyone just got along, someone's probably lying. And two, you're probably not pushing yourself hard enough. And what conflict does, and if we can understand what healthy conflict looks like, and that doesn't mean every conflict is going to be healthy. Some conflicts are going to be unnecessary. Some conflicts are going to be petty, and that's just who we are as humans. We're allowed that mistake. And when we do get into conflict, it's framing the understanding of, it's both of us on the same side against the issue, not I'm trying to be right and you're trying to be right. But I think a lot of esports players and a lot of people in esports say, this is my idea. I'm going to defend my idea against your idea instead of these are the ideas we've come through. They don't align, but in the middle ground of all these ideas, there's something that's productive to take from. But everyone just wants to defend.
Yeah.
A lot of conversations happen in the sense of you might say something to me and I'll acknowledge, I'll go, yes, but then you'll hear, yes, but. I try and get a lot of players to say yes and so you can fully unravel the thread, and then once you've come to the dead end of the conversation, you can then rationalize, is this the way of thinking we want to adopt or not? But a lot of people don't even get there. They just go, you've said this, I don't agree, so I'm just going to say I disagree. And I'm going to try and prove I'm right, and I'm going to try to prove you're wrong. Or I'm more right than you're right. Instead of, oh, that's a really cool idea. What do you mean by this, this, this? I'm not sure here. I don't really see what you mean by this. Can you please explain to me a bit more? And then once everything's left in the air, you can be like, I don't feel like I can operate within this system. Is there another system? This is my idea of a system. Is there a middle ground here? And this sounds really tedious, and obviously probably not, as you don't want to go through this conversation as robotically as I have. But if you went through that, you're still conflicting, but you're productively conflicting. You're not just conflicting for the sake of conflict.
Yes, which drives people against the team as opposed to driving people toward the goals and values of the team, which is, and I've seen this play out, and it really sucks, especially because in team environments, if the culture is not in a good place, it can often be a situation where, like, I mean, there's various things that can happen, but you can have other players that will start to put pressure on the person. Like if one person has a more dissenting opinion than the rest of the team, other players may put pressure on that player when it turns into a confrontation, which then ostracizes that player in a way that's pretty damaging, because then they're not going to be very discouraged to share things, and they're going to feel like they're not liked. And it's weird because they're not going to be able to pinpoint that feeling to like a specific thing, because it's just a general feeling of like the team was against me, and that's a very damaging thing. And so I've seen that happen, and it's awful, and it shouldn't happen. And this is in environments too with people that love each other and like each other, yeah, if you have these confrontations and people don't know how to manage it correctly, the adults in the room and the coaches have to really have a mechanism in place to help deal with these. And then again, we set it up earlier, and I think this is why Legacy is such an important book, because it creates this like foundational these foundational principles that you can kind of use those to kind of understand that, okay, well, if I'm doing something that is not productive towards the aim of enforcing the kinds of, or encouraging the kinds of character that I want, or let's say we're not pulling together in a team, we're not aligning along the vision in some way, or like whatever it is, there's all of these aligning principles. No matter the situation, you can look at through that book and be like, okay, I need a system that can help me to align principles right now, and go through that process, I think, that you just went through, to then do that. But if you don't do it and you just like try to like leave it, that's really bad. That's really bad. It's like so bad. It's so bad. It's so bad. It's so bad when you're in the room when that's happening. It's so bad. It's so bad because you also know that you're losing that weekend. And everyone probably feels that way too. Like that's the thing. It's like, oh, well, fuck, if we're having like, this kind of and you're disagreeing on fundamental things. And then it's the other, sorry, I'm like adding a point here. Sometimes it's a case that if you get to the resolution and it's still not done in the correct way, the player that didn't, let's say, have their idea heard out or implemented in the way that they wanted it to like, maybe that was like the point of the confrontation. If they kind of lose out in that situation in the wrong way, where it's not, again, a pulling together, that you got to the outcome of resolving things, now they are going to feel like, fuck this, fuck and fuck this team. And they may start to sabotage without even realizing it. And so there is all kinds of bad shit that can come from mismanaging this.
Not even that. I've seen players willingly sabotage, like knowingly sabotage just to spite their teammates. I've been the head coach, and this is like one of like the things. Like I've been the head coach on a team, and my player's gone like, you said this to me yesterday, so like, this is not my proudest moment, and this is like mistakes in my own coaching journey, and this goes to prove like I have all the research in the world to tell me how to coach, and I'm still making mistakes, and it's completely fine. And one day we're in scrims, and my player is being too vocal in comms, and he's getting too excited, he's clouding the comms. So I tell him, and at this point, I'm coaching in India, I'm working with a team in Europe. We're finishing scrims at like 11 o'clock European time, and it's like 3:30 in the morning for me, right? So I'm tired, I'm exhausted, and I want to get over this review. And everyone's bickering in review, and I just go, "Hey guys, be quiet. These are the things, right? I just want to. We're not having productive conversation." This player then goes on to take it as be quiet. So he comes into next day's training, doesn't say a single word from the minute he joins the call to until the end of the first game, and then three of my players message me like, "What's up with this guy?" And I'm like, "I don't know. Maybe he's had a bad day because this guy was like a pretty emotional dude." Like maybe he's had a bad day. Okay, cool. Like, what's up? Hey man, what's up? I message him in the chat. Then he doesn't reply, and before he gets the second game, I'm like, we're not playing the second game until you tell us what's up. And then he goes, "Oh, you told me to be quiet yesterday, so I'm just assuming my place." I'm just like, okay, well, all right. Maybe I handled the situation wrong when I told you to be quiet, and maybe I acted out of frustration. But like, surely there's like, and then he's like, and you also didn't apologize to me after. I was like, well, bro, it's 3:30 in the morning for me. I want to go to bed, and you're bickering about something that's not relevant to anything that we've set up, and you're actively working against the good work we did in that practice. Yeah, I acknowledge I didn't realize the impact it had on you, but at no point did you come and tell me like, "Hey, this wasn't acceptable to me," and this, like, and you've come and you've made these assumptions that I'm trying to like harm you, and now you're taking it out on the team when your gripes with me, and it's just like don't create more conflict when we can just have a conversation and get
Hmm.
over it.
Yeah.
And it's just like, sure, I made a mistake, and I tell a lot. I tell every team I start with, if I'm the head coach, and I've done this since I was 16, and when I started coaching basketball, I tell them, "You're the player, I'm the coach. We're both gonna make mistakes. They're gonna look completely different. I'm gonna help you be a better player. You're gonna help me be a better coach. Are we okay to learn together?" And once I can convince them all to say yes, I know we're gonna have a good experience.
Nice. I like that too because you're also kind of like creating a spoken contract there where you can kind of go back to it and say, look, you guys know what we signed up for here. This is the process.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And one thing that comes to my mind too is again something that I felt like was illustrated really well in Legacy. I'm sorry for everyone because I reference it all the time. But how they what they call the dual management model. This idea that the senior players in the team have a role in which they should. It is more effective for them to hold their peers to certain standards than it would be for the coach to actually do it. So it'd be more power. And I think one of the examples they used was something like there was like two of the younger players on the team went out and got like hammered or something the night before a match or something. They came in a little bit late to the stadium the next day or whatever it was, and the senior players in the team were like. They're like, what the fuck are you guys doing? And they basically like just disciplined them on the spot and just gave them a lot of shit. And, to correct them to say like, this is the standard that you're supposed to live up to. This is the standard we all live up to. And you're breaking that standard and just like holding them accountable to the standards of the team. And if you've done, I feel like a good job with the team culture and you've done well to sort of empower the senior players to really feel that they have so much ownership that it is offensive to them, that their efforts and that the team's efforts and that the vision is harmed by other players. That should be offensive to you. That should be offensive. Those people don't belong in the team. That should be the feeling that you have, and you should be pissed, and the players should discipline them. Like that's
Yeah, it's like
amazing place to
I'm
be.
sacrificing everything. I want to go for a drink too, but I'm not going for it
Yeah.
because I'm here trying to chase this goal that we've agreed upon. It's not like that you're not allowed to drink, but it's like we've agreed we're not going to do it today.
Yeah.
So don't. And it's like I don't know if you watched the Dream Team documentary for the 2008 Olympics.
I have not.
All the players.
Noting it down.
It's a really good, really good documentary about team culture, and maybe because Kobe Bryant's somewhat front and center in it. But one of the things is all the players they're in Beijing, or I believe they're in training camp, one or the other, and all the players have gone out. They've gone to explore the city, and they're coming back home at 4 o'clock in the morning, and they're all a bit shit faced and whatever. And they're walking to the lobby, and Kobe Bryant just is walking to the gym. Now all the players are like, "Wait, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. This guy's crazy. We have training in 3 hours or whatever." And then what actually happens is he is actually at training before they are, and he goes up to these guys and is like, "Yo, what's up? Are we here to drink? Or are we here to train? Are we here to win the gold medal? Or do you want to walk out as you as NBA stars not being able to win the Olympics?" And then slowly by surely, one player then starts walking up to the gym with him. The next player starts walking up to the gym with him, and now slowly the whole USA men's basketball team is training at the gym past midnight. And then they're putting in that extra work that's needed, and because they realize it is shameful when USA can't win basketball, they can't win the gold medal there. They realize that this is the goal, and this is the senior leader at this point in the team. He's brought in for his leadership capabilities, whether he does it in like the pretty way or not, and he's going to help us buy into that. And there's value in listening to our veterans. Now,
Yeah.
the issue with esports is everyone thinks the veteran on the team is just whatever, man. Like you just got to do this before me, and people don't really like authority in esports. I
Yeah.
know I personally don't really like authority, but because I've come through playing traditional sports all my life, and I've had the chance to, when I lived in Hong Kong and in high school, um, I got the chance to train with the national water polo team. I really
Nice.
understood the value
Water polo
of
players are hard fucking core. Sorry, just had to throw that out there. Go ahead.
yeah, it's definitely not everyone's cup of tea as a sport, but it's you understand that even though you might not agree with the words that come out of a veteran's mouth, the fact that a veteran takes the time to try and give you knowledge, you should always be grateful for that, and you should always find a way to connect with them, because you don't have to agree with everything you say, but having that social support when you're on the team, or even if you move on to a different team, is so invaluable in your career.
Yeah, I think I think it's honestly it's one of the things that in team sports makes me emotional is when I see good leadership, because
Mm,
I think good leadership in general in life is lacking, and I love sports because it's I feel like it eliminates a lot of noise because it's meritocratic. Everyone is pulling
mm,
towards one specific, very specific, easily quantifiable goal. And so sports are all about how can we create the most elite team to get there. So you're eliminating all the noise of, like, let's say another environment where this is similar. You're working in a tech startup or something like that, where you've got a team of 20 people or something like that. That is the same kind of idea, in the sense that we should, in theory, have a good team culture. We should all be empowered in the right ways. We should all be moving towards one specific goal. But most people in those environments, unlike a professional sports team, they're not leaders. They don't know how to lead. But if you're going to be on an elite sports team, you need to have, the only way it can work is if you have true, actual leaders in the sports
mm,
team. Because, like you say, leaders set the standards. If the leaders don't live, to the standard of highest operating elite standards you can think of, then no one else will. And the leaders always set the culture effectively. The coaches can do whatever, but it's on the leaders in the team and to be able to set those standards and to hold people to them. And if you don't, then you don't have the culture, essentially. And I feel like I see this all the time, where I've been in companies, I've seen so many companies, I've heard so many stories from friends who work at companies where I'm just like, this is just a management problem, this is a leadership problem, and this will never be fixed. And I say sometimes to them, this will never be fixed because this person is in an executive position. And so, and they are like, all of the problems in the culture are downstream of this person. They're not willing to
mm,
hold themselves accountable. They're not willing to be honest with themselves about their own, part of the problem. They're not willing to hold others accountable to the standards. They're not willing to punish people. They're not willing by firing them if they have stepped so far outside of the values of the team. I remember when I was in my interviews with 100 Thieves initially. They said, okay, what if we're in a situation where we tell you have to like take this player on? And I was like, and I said, look, my job is to is to ensure that the team wins. And so if you are suggesting a player to me that I think is going to harm the culture of the team, to me, that's like the most sacred, precious thing possible. That's the basis of everything that I'm going to try and build. So if you tell me to do that, I'm going to quit, because firstly, you shouldn't ever do that if you're hiring me so that you don't have to do that. But at the same time, esports is a bit different, because they're like, what if we get like a guy that's a mega influencer that, and so there's other business incentives, but that's not something I should care about. And so the culture is king, and the leaders in the team set the culture and the standards by which everyone has to operate. And I've been watching Ted Lasso recently, and I hadn't seen it before. Have you watched it? It's like
really, really good.
It's so good.
I watched it about 4 or 5 times now.
It's so good.
So good.
And I'm always surprised, actually, because I'm like, it reminds me a little bit of the US Office. Have you watched The Office?
I've watched all like the YouTube compilations of like the fun bits, but I've never actually sat down and watched the show front to back.
It's a little bit different, but it's kind of similar in some ways, because like Michael Scott, who's like, the leader in the office,
the vulgar leader,
who
jokes around, gets nothing done.
But he's actually really good at his job, and that's like kind of the thing behind all of it, is he's actually really good principally at his job, even though he's kind of a clown and in many different ways. And similarly, like with Ted Lasso, I like get surprised, because I'm like, obviously Ted Lasso is really goofy, but there's so many principles there from like some of these books we've been talking about, like the dual management model, like, there's players disciplining other players, coaches holding other coaches to standards, people holding each other to standards, like thinking outside of the box to solve solutions, like the stuff that we're talking about, how you do team bonding, or like just like all these varying things. There's lots of examples there of like actually really good practices in teams, and I'm like, oh my god, this is really cool.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, like everyone loves throwing the sentence out, it's a marathon, not a sprint, in esports. But if you really take that sentiment and dive into it, no one's actually thinking about like where everyone's like, if everyone is running together in that marathon, no one actually thinks about where people are standing. And in my mind, the coaches should be like the back markers, right? And then you need people who are the pace setters of the team within the team. And those are your players.
Yeah.
You need a player who's the pace setter, who says, we shouldn't be going faster than this, but this is how fast we should go. And then your back markers is making sure no one falls over, no one injures themselves, that everyone's keeping up. But they need that one person to guide them through it. And more often than not, it is best done through a player. But there have been times where, because of some of the low quality moments of coaching in esports, players come in with so much baggage and distrust towards coaches. It becomes really hard to identify which player becomes that best player, because sometimes you can say like, this player is the best leader for the team, but because he's coming in with trauma and baggage from his previous esports experiences, he can't lead this team because he won't know how to assume that responsibility correctly.
Yeah.
So you sometimes lose a leader, even though he has the right skill set. You can't pull it out of him because he's not ready to be vulnerable again.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I ran into that exact situation. It's very challenging to deal with that, actually, because you're kind of, I think it's like we were talking about this earlier too, where there's like this level, I think with the fitness thing and some other things too, where it's like, okay, you need kind of a level of trust and vulnerability. But you're just saying, but like what you're highlighting is like, hey, a player can join the team where like to reach that level of trust and vulnerability could take a year potentially. Like it just really depends on the baggage. And I had a player where really important player. I mean, everyone is in such small teams in like attack FPS, but he was in a situation where it's like I could tell that he was distancing himself emotionally in ways that are not conducive to like the best performance for the team and also for himself. And it was because he's been in lots of really fucked up scenarios with teams where he like couldn't trust that other people around me gonna stay around me. Everyone that's coached me before, like I've had coaches that like, acted really like aggressively towards me and like, really bad coaching. I've had situations where people just get cut just like with no notice or warning. I've got people like not talking to us about that. Like, so it's just all this like insecure environments where like trauma is sustained, especially for younger players too.
Mm.
Yeah, that's tough to deal with because now you're like, well, this player's really good, and it's kind of fucked up because if you like end up cutting them, it's like they're going to keep that stuff. And I mean, it's not your problem
Yeah.
for in a certain respect. You know, you have to make the team win, but it's complicated. Like all these things are so much more complicated than the strategy and the tactics in the game. It's like it's
Oh
so
yeah.
little about that when you're like trying to manage a team and you're trying to set the schedules, you're trying to work out how everyone should best operate, you're trying to bring the best out of all these players, and so that's why I think it's really cool what you're doing. Putting a focus on that is really exciting. I can't wait to see all of the stuff that you're doing, and I'm glad we got to connect over all of this.
Yeah, I mean, it's been fun. What was it? There's gonna be a fun podcast episode for you to edit hereafter. We might need like a popcorn warning at the start because it's been a nice, good conversation. I think like maybe like a hot take here is I think the head coach. It'd be nice if you can work around the games, and I understand there's organizational and resource constraints, and you can't have full-fledged coaching staff. Because everyone has the motivation to make money out of when they're putting time in. But I think, at least for me, how I see it is a head coach needs to be a very competent decision maker in terms of where are we putting in time and how we're gonna and what is our system gonna look like. And if you support him with a good strategic coach, someone who can talk about the game, and then like and like two coaches in that regard, so like players have enough contact time with knowledgeable in-game experts, because players already have their own expertise within the game, so they just need people who can help them healthily like navigate and express those ideas both while playing and while talking to each other. um I think that in itself is like the core essential coaching team anyone needs. I don't think the head coach necessarily needs to be the one talking about the game. I think the head coach is just the decision maker for which the ship goes. It's like the captain of a ship. The captain of a ship isn't tying the knots on the sail. He's not, scrubbing the deck. He's not cleaning, serving the food. But he's making sure everyone's cared for. He's making sure that we're all on the right direction on the coordinates. He's making sure that if there's a hole in the ship, he knows who can fix it, and he's giving them the support that they require. I think it's very similar that coaching can look like this in the future. If we look at traditional sports, the head coach of a team, yeah, he's probably going to be there at training every day, giving instruction and talking to the players. But he also has eight to 9 or 10 different coaches that are working with small subunits of the team and working with them to design training and do that. He's not sat there designing the training from minute 1 to minute 100. He has people to do that for them, so he can think more long term, more strategically of the direction of the team. But one, because we're so constrained from like a resource perspective,
Yeah.
the head coach has to be the data analyst, the strategic coach, the manager, the psychologist, the parent, the friend, all of these things, and there's a world where I feel like if you're a tier one org and you genuinely can't pay people, just say, hey, we're looking for interns. We will give you experience. We will put you on our social media. If you're worth your salt as a tier one org, you should have like some form of social media branding, marketing plan. We will give you opportunities to raise your profile. Like we're gonna pay you an exposure, but in a world where even entry level jobs today need 4 to 5 years of experience, people are willing to. If you're a true beginner or you're truly trying to find your feet in esports, I think you should be willing to let go of a salary if you can guarantee meaningful profile building. I still do this today. Even though I am a leading researcher in Skillac, I'm on my way to a PhD, and yeah, I might only have 600 followers on social media and whatever. I am more than happy to go to a team and say, I will work with your coaching staff for free as long as you can promote the work I'm doing and help me make more people aware that this is possible, that these things are okay. I'm more than comfortable doing that. Um, I understand not everyone will be, um, but I think that mentality sometimes when you get paid to do something, you can also become complacent because you're like, oh, well, money's coming in, so I'm already doing good things. And sometimes not having that financial reward can help you provide your best work. I think all my best work has happened when I've done it for free. So maybe it's a hot take, maybe it's not the best thing. Maybe it's not the best mindset to have, but I definitely do think to help the head coach, if you can't organize resources and funding for it, you should definitely still have a meaningful way to get people engaged, so that the head coach isn't burdened by 8 different jobs, because he will never be effective that way.
Yeah, it's a really hard thing to solve. Absolutely, it does. I'm not sure. There's so many variables that are outside of our control that impact all of these things. I think we kind of touched on it earlier, just the fact that it seems like teams have largely teams have largely failed in terms of monetization for themselves, and this is in part due to the fact that you have some leading players setting sort of the expectations around the standards, and then everyone else sort of copying that. Obviously, initially in a sort of we were in the 0% interest rate, territory where like mega amounts of venture capital was flooding in. So many people were sort of like, able to get good money to be in these teams doing these roles, but there's no profitability still. And so, at that point, it's like not working. Like what's being done is not working. And so, of course, all the wheels fell off as soon as we got into sort of, economic climate that could no longer sustain all of that. And then at that point, you really see where all the fat is that needs to get trimmed. And now real solutions need to come in. So I'm hopeful that we are going to be sort of in that phase, like kind of rebounding from this economic scenario. But obviously, with being in the election year and with all the other instability in the world, it's kind of unclear what's going to happen in that sense. But I am confident that we will get to that point that people, because this is the other thing, like everyone knows, like gaming it's the biggest industry. It's the biggest entertainment industry in the world. Okay, esports is a niche of that, but it is still extremely popular, and it's only going to get more popular. There's only going to be more people that play video games over time. Like that's just how it's going to go, and everyone knows that. So eventually we're going to get there. I just wonder, like, I hope it's in our lifetimes, like, I don't know, like, and then with that said, you've got all this, like, are we going to have, like, have you seen the advanced games, or what they call, no, the enhanced games? Have you heard of that?
No, I haven't.
So there's this, there's a bunch of people, very rich hedge fund people and otherwise, who are investing in something called the enhanced games. And it's basically, it's the Olympics, but for athletes who are allowed to dope. So the whole idea is that everybody is allowed to transparently. They're going to have some, I'm sure rules and restrictions around health and stuff, but
safety regulations.
Yeah. But yeah, it's they're going to have the Olympics, but like doping will be there. So that's going to be really interesting. And I'm reminded of this because I was thinking about like the stuff with the Neuralink patient recently who received Neuralink and is able to just basically like look at stuff on the screen and, well, he can kill that thing. So he's going to be able to be far superior in terms of dispatching opponents with his brain than we would be with a mouse and a keyboard. So because this is what I'm wondering is, like, is esports gonna be what we think esports is now, but like in 20 years, or will the technological changes in the world like be so exponentially different that it just changes everything? I wonder. Maybe we'll have to have separate leagues.
Yeah, we're getting closer to Wall-E being a reality. That scares me, actually.
That is quite scary, yeah. Wall-E especially, because everyone becomes like so reliant and fat and just kind of like in this position of just like not doing anything, So that's kind of scary. But we'll see how that goes, I suppose. But yeah, this has been a super interesting conversation. You're right, we're at 3 hours and 20 minutes, so I should probably save some material for future appearances. If you're interested, I'd love to talk to you again. And I also do some spaces 100%. As well sometimes, like where I do coaching spaces. I get some coaches on, and we'll just like shoot the shit and see kind of who pops up, and those have been really fun. So thank you so much, Kabir. It's been an absolute pleasure. We covered a lot of ground, and I found this to be like deeply interesting, and I'm gonna noodle away at some other topics we could potentially talk about because I didn't understand before talking with you that you're quite as ambitious with your goals in the space as you are, and I think it's really awesome. And so I really want to keep talking and kind of see how you're progressing with things because it's really cool what you're doing.
No, no, thank you very much for bringing me on. I think you've had a lot of interesting podcasts. Like as I said right, right before we met, I kind of had like a skim through, and it's refreshing to see other people just be curious and be willing to have open conversations. And I think this is what the space needs. Maybe not everyone needs a podcast, but I think this is if anyone has a podcast, I think you should definitely.
I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Well, it's been a blast, and I'll let you go to bed, I guess. I don't know what your schedule's like. It's really late for you. You were telling me that you basically don't have a schedule, kind of. So I don't know if I'm concerned or impressed.
No, I'll be fine. I got some work I need to get done before I go to bed. So probably an hour of uptime and then bedtime for sure.
Awesome. All right. Well, I will catch you later. Best of luck and have a good one.
Cheers.